Chapter 1. Pregnant. I stood motionless in front of the boutique's full-length mirror, watching the saleswoman fuss over my hair. Her nimble fingers curled a few strands of my auburn hair while another assistant made the final adjustments to my ceremonial robe. "You look absolutely breathtaking, Miss Winters," the saleswoman gushed, stepping back to admire her work. The robe was objectively beautiful, white silk with diamonds meticulously sewn along the neckline and sleeves, catching the light with every slight movement. It draped over my figure perfectly, as it should for the astronomical price the Winters pack had paid for it. But all I felt was the fabric tightening around me like shackles. "Is something wrong with the fit?" the assistant asked, noticing my discomfort. "It's fine," I replied automatically, the lie sliding easily from my lips after years of practice. My emerald eyes stared back at me in the mirror, betraying none of the turmoil inside. This bonding ceremony was meant to symbolize my union with Alexander Amber, the alpha heir to the Northern Territories. A strategic alliance between the Northern and Winters packs, sealed through mating bonds. Politics wrapped in white silk and diamonds. I couldn't help but think of another man, tall, with piercing blue eyes that seemed to see through all my defenses. Roman, my foster brother, who used to keep me warm when I was cold and care for me when I was abandoned. And the man I could never have, I thought grimly, wondering how he was doing now. My phone buzzed in my purse, temporarily freeing me from my thoughts. "I need to take this," I told the saleswoman, stepping away from her hands. Emma's name flashed across the screen. My best friend rarely called during working hours at the treatment center, so I immediately answered. "Emma? What's wrong?" Her voice came through breathless and urgent. "Scarlett, you won't believe this. I just saw Alexander and Grace at the treatment center." My spine stiffened. "Grace is back from Europe?" "Yes, but that's not all. They were at the OBGYN and Grace seemed..." Emma hesitated, then pushed forward. "Scarlett, she's pregnant with his child." I heard them discussing it. The world around me grew silent. The boutique, with its expensive fabrics and glittering accessories, faded from my awareness. Emma's words pierced through my heart like a silver dagger. "Are you sure?" My voice sounded distant to my own ears. "Positive. I'm so sorry, Scarlett. I thought you should know before. Thank you for telling me." I cut her off, not wanting to hear more. I hung up and stood perfectly still for exactly 3 seconds. Then, with deliberate movements, I reached for the clasps of the ceremonial robe. "Miss Winters? We still need to finalize the..." I tore the robe off my body, not caring about the delicate stitching or precious stones. The fabric made a satisfying ripping sound as I pulled it free and threw it to the floor. The saleswoman gasped. "Miss Winters, that robe is worth..." "Bill it to Alexander Amber," I said coldly, already pulling on my regular clothes. "He can afford it." My phone rang again. Alexander's name flashed on the screen. I answered, not bothering with pleasantries. "What?" His voice came through, commanding and haughty as always. "My office, now." "Is that an order, Alexander?" I asked sweetly, venom lacing my tone. "Don't test me today, Scarlett. Just get here." He hung up. A sneer formed at the corner of my mouth as I stared at the phone. Inside my head, my wolf Cora growled with rage. "He dares to command us?" she snarled. "After betraying our trust?" "Not for much longer," I promised her silently. I gathered my belongings, leaving the ruined ceremonial robe in a heap on the boutique floor. The diamond-studded fabric looked like scattered stars against the dark carpet, a fitting metaphor for my shattered engagement. As I drove to Alexander's office, Cora continued to pace angrily in my mind. "We were never fated mates," she reminded me, her fury building. "Just a political match. We agreed to this union for the benefit of the Winters pack." "And now he's betrayed us with Grace," I said aloud, gripping the steering wheel tighter. "My adopted sister, that bitch." Grace Winters, my adopted sister, the daughter of the alpha who replaced me for so many years, was sent to Europe 3 years ago. She's the one Alexander always dreamed of marrying. "Today we end this farce," I told Cora firmly. Half an hour later, I strode through the Amber Pack's main building, my heels clicking purposefully against the marble floor. Pack members scurried out of my path, sensing my barely controlled rage. Alexander's assistant jumped to her feet when I approached. "Miss Winters, he's expecting you, but..." I pushed past her, throwing open his office door without knocking. Alexander sat reclined behind his massive oak desk, looking every bit the arrogant alpha heir he was. His black hair was perfectly styled, his expensive suit immaculate. The office reeked of his signature cologne, mixed with something else, cigarette smoke. "Scarlett, you're late," he began, condescension dripping from every word. I remained silent, closing the door behind me. Alexander reached for a cigarette, lighting it despite knowing how much I detested the smell, a small but deliberate show of disrespect. "Grace is back," he continued, exhaling smoke in my direction. "She's sick with silver poisoning and she needs me." I arched an eyebrow. "Silver poisoning? How unfortunate." "It's serious," Alexander snapped. She requires constant care." He pushed a document on his desk at me. "I suggest postponing our partner bonding ceremony. Grace's condition requires my full attention. Of course, this is only a stopgap measure." I approached his desk slowly, eyeing the postponement papers. With deliberate calm, I picked them up, examining the contents briefly. "Postponement?" My voice was as cold as winter frost. I tore the papers in half, then quarters, letting the pieces flutter onto his desk. Alexander's eyes widened. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" "It's not necessary," I said, stepping closer until my hands rested on his desk. "Let's just break off the engagement now." "Have you lost your mind?" Alexander stood abruptly, his chair rolling back. "This union has been planned for years. Our pacts will survive," I cut in, and I'm thinking more clearly than I have in months. Alexander's face darkened with anger. "You're talking crazy. This is about Grace, isn't it? You've always been jealous of her." A laugh escaped me, sharp and without humor. "Jealous? Of your pregnant mistress? I think not." The color drained from Alexander's face. "Who told you?" "It doesn't matter," I interrupted. "What matters is that you're a liar and a cheat, Alexander. Did you think I wouldn't find out?" He recovered quickly, his jaw setting in that stubborn way I'd come to despise. "Get out. Go cool off somewhere and think about what you're throwing away." "There's nothing to think about," I replied. "We're done." I turned toward the door, feeling lighter with each step. Behind me, Alexander called out, "This isn't over, Scarlett. You can't just walk away from this arrangement." I paused with my hand on the doorknob, looking over my shoulder. "Watch me." I slammed the door behind me, the sound echoing through the hallway. Several secretaries stood in the corridor, pretending to work but obviously eavesdropping. As I walked past, their whispers reached my sensitive ears. I knew she couldn't keep him satisfied. Grace has always been his true choice for Luna. No wonder he strayed. Have you seen her temper? Winters' pack would prefer to have their biological daughters joined in marriage, but everyone knows that Alexander only wants Grace. I stopped walking. The whispering immediately ceased as they realized I had heard everything. Slowly, I turned to face them. The wolves lowered their gazes, but I could still sense their disdain. One female secretary, Melissa I recalled, seemed particularly smug, a small smile playing at her lips. I walked over to her. Melissa tried to back away, but I was faster. I reached out and cupped her chin, forcing her to meet my gaze. My voice was low and deadly. "You can make fun of me all you want here, but don't forget that your alphas aren't the only ones with teeth." I slapped her face dismissively, then let my fingers trail along the veins in her neck, a subtle threat that even the dimmest wolf couldn't misinterpret. Melissa trembled. Her earlier bravado evaporating, I released her and straightened my spine, holding my head high as I walked away. Each wolf I passed bowed their head instinctively. The sound of my heels on marble, the only noise in the now silent corridor. I had nothing to fear. I had nothing to lose. It was time to go to my office, gather my belongings, and begin the next chapter of my life. As for Alexander, the dumbass, tell him to f*** off. Chapter 2. Cancel the engagement. Scarlett's. I walked into my office and slammed the door so hard the frame rattled. The sound echoed in the small space, thundering against my heartbeat. "That arrogant, cheating bastard," Cora snarled inside my head. I felt my fingernails elongate into razor-sharp wolf claws, the transformation unstoppable as rage coursed through my veins. With a swift, violent motion, I dragged my claws across the ornate mahogany desk, leaving deep gouges in the expensive wood. The destruction felt good, necessary. "He thinks he can just postpone our ceremony like it's some inconvenient business meeting," Cora continued her tirade. "And smoking in his office when he knows you hate it. deliberately disrespecting us. I took several deep breaths, trying to calm my wolf. The last thing I needed was to shift in the middle of the Amber Pack headquarters. "I know, Cora," I whispered aloud. "But we're free now." My wolf huffed, still restless beneath my skin. We were never meant to be with him anyway. Not our fated mate. Never was. She was right. From the beginning, Cora had resisted the arranged marriage. She'd fought me every step of the way, making it clear that Alexander wasn't meant for us. Wolves know their true mates instinctively, and Alexander had never triggered that recognition. I moved to the bookshelf, pulling down the few personal items I kept in this office. A photo of Emma and me at graduation, a small carved wolf that Roman had given me years ago, a few reference books on herbal medicine I couldn't risk leaving behind. "Good," Cora approved as I began emptying the desk drawers. "Leave nothing behind." I was halfway through packing when the door burst open without warning. Alexander stood in the doorway, his eyes widening slightly as he took in the sight of me gathering my belongings. The scratches on the desk didn't escape his notice either. "What the hell are you doing?" he demanded, closing the door behind him. I didn't bother looking up. "What does it look like?" Alexander approached the desk slowly, his expression shifting from anger to forced composure. He straightened his tie, a nervous habit I'd noticed over our 2 years of engagement. "Scarlett, stop this nonsense," he said, his tone attempting authority. "Grace isn't feeling well. She needs me by her side. The marking ceremony is only temporarily postponed." With practiced ease, he withdrew a cigarette from his pocket and lit it, the acrid smoke curling upward. Another deliberate provocation. He knew how much I hated the smell. I stepped around the desk, perfectly calm on the outside, while Cora surged with icy fury beneath my skin. This unnatural stillness was more dangerous than any outburst. "Uncomfortable?" My voice cut through the air, each word laced with spite. Alexander exhaled smoke, watching me through narrowed eyes. "Not pregnant?" I added, my question crackling with dominance and accusation. The cigarette froze halfway to his mouth. For a split second, genuine shock registered on his face before his features hardened into a mask of anger. "Who told you that?" he growled, taking a threatening step toward me. I had no intention of dancing around his lies anymore. "Alexander, can't you be honest for once? It's not like the treatment center is a private place. Everyone knows that the OBGYN isn't where you go to treat silver poisoning." His face flushed with anger, the vein in his temple pulsing visibly. "Don't slander us," he snarled. "It's just that there's something special about where she was poisoned." His voice dropped to a low, dangerous rumble as he unleashed his alpha power. The energy rolled through the room like a physical wave, designed to overwhelm me, to force submission. It washed over me ineffectively. What Alexander didn't know, what almost no one knew, was that I was immune to alpha commands. No alpha power could force me to submit, not since I was 13 years old. Normally, to avoid trouble, I'd pretend to be as oppressed by his power as anyone else, but today I didn't want to pretend anymore. I looked at him with undisguised contempt. "So what? Alexander, we both understand that you won't let go of her." "That's not true," he protested sharply. "When she recovers, I will." My cold laugh cut him off mid-sentence. "You will what? Send her away? Place her elsewhere? And then I shall thankfully ask you to mark me?" I refused to let him finish, my eyes flashing with anger as I bared my teeth. My claws extended fully, catching the light. "Honestly, I don't care about this marriage, and I don't care about you," I spat, venom in every word. "We were a political match to begin with, so this is the end of it. You go back to Grace." The words fell like stones in the silent room. Alexander stared at me, disbelief mingling with his anger. He was increasing his alpha power, his confusion growing as it failed to silence me or bring me to my knees. "You can't just walk away from this," he started, but I was already moving past him. In one swift motion, I reached out and yanked the cigarette from between his lips. "And by the way," I added, crushing the cigarette between my fingers, "don't smoke in front of me, you stupid ass. I've put up with you for far too long." I tossed the mangled cigarette into the trash and grabbed my bag of belongings. Alexander grabbed my arm, his grip tight. "It's not over, Scarlett. You think it's over? Your pack needs our union." I stared at his hand and shook him off as hard as I could. That would require my dear parents to find another solution. I'm not their solution anymore. Without another word, I strode toward the door, leaving him standing in my former office. The hallway outside was bustling with activity, though it quieted noticeably as I emerged. Neither of us had curbed our voices earlier, and it was obvious that they had all heard the content of our argument. I was nearly to the elevators when Melissa stepped directly into my path. The same secretary who had mocked me earlier now stood with her chin raised, false confidence in her stance. "Miss Winters," she said loudly enough for others to hear, "you can't just walk away. You can't be disrespectful to the heir to the Alpha King like this." I laughed dismissively, the sound echoing in the suddenly quiet hallway. "He's your alpha, not mine. Get out of my way." Melissa didn't budge. Instead, she crossed her arms and continued, "This is why you're not fit to be Luna. A true Luna would be gentle, generous, would care for all pack members." Several onlookers nodded in agreement, emboldened by Melissa's public challenge. "Unlike Grace," someone murmured from the side, "she has a natural grace about her." Cora snarled in my mind, "Show them what happens when they block our path." Without warning, I raised my foot and struck Melissa quickly and directly in the crook of her knee. The precise blow caused her leg to collapse immediately, and she fell straight to her knees, letting out a startled gasp. "I told you to get out of my way," I said calmly, looking down at her. "You think I'm happy to be his Luna? Ridiculous." I raised my eyes to scan the office area, making eye contact with each wolf who dared to meet my gaze. Most looked away quickly. "I suggest you all work hard and mind your own business," I announced to the room. "Your alpha have plenty of problems to solve without you adding to them." Without waiting for a response, I stepped around Melissa's kneeling form and continued toward the front doors. No one else tried to stop me. As I pushed through the heavy glass doors into the afternoon sunlight, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. The air smelled sweeter, the colors around me seemed brighter. For the first time in months, possibly years, I was making my own choice. "Freedom," Cora purred in satisfaction. "Finally." I nodded in silent agreement as I walked to my car. The engagement that was weighing me down like a shackle was finally broken, though I knew it wasn't going to end that easily. Chapter 3. Sever every tie. I stretched and was enjoying the free sunshine when a familiar sleek black SUV pulled up in front of me. The tinted windows rolled down to reveal Jason Reed, Alexandria's beta, sitting behind the wheel. My stomach clenched as the passenger door opened. Grace Winter stepped out, moving with a deliberately fragile grace that made my teeth ache. Despite her supposed silver poisoning, she looked immaculate, her platinum blonde hair cascaded in perfect waves, her designer outfit complementing her willowy figure. The pack members in the yard froze, their attention instantly captured by her arrival. It was like watching moths drawn to a flame. "Grace," one of the office staff called out, rushing forward. "You're back from Europe." Grace's pale blue eyes sparkled with pure joy. "I'm back, darling. I missed you all," she cooed, her voice sweet as syrup. From her oversized purse, she began producing beautifully wrapped packages, handing them out to every wolf who approached. "Just a few trinkets from my travels," she said modestly, though the packages were clearly expensive. I curled my lip in disgust as I watched their eager reactions. Pack members who had just witnessed my confrontation with Alexander were now fawning over Grace like she was already their Luna. "Always the same performance," Cora growled within me. The fragile princess bestowing gifts upon her adoring subjects. This wasn't the first time I'd witnessed this scene. Even during my engagement to Alexander, the pack had made it abundantly clear who they preferred as their future Luna. Grace had been groomed for the role her entire life, or rather, my entire life, since she had taken my place in the Winters pack. This is not without irony for me. In this drama of real and fake princesses, an attack on my birth pack by hoodlums resulted in the babies being switched. Grace was the fake princess who was raised as the baby daughter of Chief Winters, while I, the real princess, was left at the orphanage. If it hadn't been for Roman and Mom, my mood dimmed. Grace spotted me watching and altered her path to approach me directly. Her steps were calculated, just weak enough to garner sympathy but not so weak as to appear truly ill. "Scarlett, my dear sister." She called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. "It's been so long." She extended her arms as if expecting a hug, a beautifully wrapped box of chocolates in her hand. "Here's a gift I brought you from Europe." I remained motionless, refusing to play into her charade. Grace dropped her arms but maintained her sweet smile, though her eyes hardened slightly. "Alexander just told me you misunderstood," she said sweetly, a look of pain laced in her fragile tone. "I came over here specifically to explain it to you, to make sure that everything between us remains harmonious." I pushed her outstretched hand away, not bothering to hide my contempt. "Harmony?" I replied coldly. "Have we ever been in harmony? You mean this harmony where you hurt me behind my back while playing the victim in his eyes?" Grace blinked rapidly, feigning surprise at my hostility. She glanced around, ensuring we had an audience before leaning in close. "Maybe Alexander understands who he really wants," she murmured, her breath hot against my ear. The familiar scent of her perfume, the same one she'd worn 3 years ago when she'd orchestrated the attack that nearly killed me, filled my nostrils. Something in me snapped. I didn't give Grace time to continue her little performance. My hand shot out, gripping her wrist like an iron vice. I could feel her pulse racing beneath my fingers. "Finally stopped pretending?" I hissed, my voice low enough that only she could hear. "You've been poisoning me with lies and trying to kill me since the moment I returned to this pack. Don't think I'm going to let you." Grace's mask of sweetness vanished for a split second, revealing the cold calculation beneath. Then, with theatrical timing, she wrenched her arm free and let out a blood-curdling scream. "Ah, you're hurting me," she wailed, clutching her wrist to her chest. Her scream echoed through the yard, drawing the attention of every wolf in the vicinity. Several stepped forward, concern etched on their faces. "Grace, are you okay? What happened?" Before I could speak in my defense, the crowd parted, and Alexander emerged from the building. His tall figure loomed over the gathering, radiating alpha authority. His amber eyes locked first on me, then darted to Grace's trembling form. "What the hell is going on here?" he demanded, his voice carrying across the yard. Grace immediately rushed to his side, pressing herself against him as if seeking protection. It's okay. Scarlett's just in a bad mood," she whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I was just trying to make peace." Alexander's face darkened with fury. "Scarlett, are you insane?" he stormed, taking a step toward me. I didn't flinch. Instead, I rolled my eyes at his predictable reaction and sauntered forward, deliberately placing myself between him and Grace. "Your delicate Grace has decided to play the poor maiden as usual," I spat, loud enough for our audience to hear. "If she is your destined mate, why don't you settle this political marriage right now and be done with it?" Alexander let out a low, warning growl, the kind that would make most wolves cower in submission. I stepped closer, deliberately and threateningly invading his space. "You don't scare me, Alexander. Just looking at your hypocrisy makes me want to vomit." Gasps echoed around us. No one spoke to an alpha this way, especially not in public. "I refuse to let you continue to humiliate me or pretend I'm part of this farce," I continued, my voice dripping with condescension. "Hurry up and cuddle and comfort your lovely Grace." I turned on my heel and strode away, leaving chaos in my wake. Behind me, I could hear Grace's continued wails of distress and Alexander's furious shouts demanding I return immediately. I ignored them all, walking briskly to my car parked at the edge of the lot. My hands were shaking with rage as I yanked open the driver's door and slid inside. "That hasn't changed at all," Cora snarled inside my head. Still playing the victim while plotting behind everyone's backs. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. 3 years ago, Grace had orchestrated an attack by rogue wolves that left me with scars both physical and mental. Instead of punishing her, the Winters pack had sent her to Europe to recover, leaving me to pick up the pieces. And now she was back, pregnant with Alexander's child, still playing the same games. I was about to start the engine when a familiar voice slid into my mind through the wolf link. "Scarlett, don't go. We need to talk." Sarah, my birth mother, who always chose Grace over me, even after discovering the truth about our birth, even after I was nearly killed by Grace. I gripped the steering wheel even tighter, ignoring the instinctive flutter I felt at hearing her voice. No matter how much I tried to harden my heart against her, Some small, pathetic part of me still yearned for her maternal affection. Talk about what, Luna Sarah? I mentally shot back, resentment clear in my tone. Alexander, or your returned baby Grace? Sarah's reply came smoothly, her tone calm but with an undercurrent of steel. Grace is sick, Scarlett. You don't understand what she's been through. She is very weak now, and in order to avoid any excitement for her, we think that the ceremony of the union of your mates with Alexander can be postponed. A harsh laugh escaped my lips. Postpone? I repeated aloud, though I knew Sarah could hear me through our link. For her? For her again? The memory of Grace hurting me came flooding back with pain and clarity. I could still feel the phantom pain of the wound from 3 years ago, the day after Grace's friend had attacked me, and I could clearly feel the sensation of my own blood coming out in great sheets and soaking the ground beneath me. Back then, you all kept asking me to forgive and forget, and promptly sent her off to Europe. I yelled into the mind link, not caring if my emotional outburst gave Sarah a headache. But you guys never cared about what I endured, what kind of damage I suffered. Do you know the desperation that comes when blood gushes out of your body in great swaths? You have no idea, and you don't care. Scarlett, please, Sarah continued to plead. You must understand the situation. Grace is truly ill this time. The silver poisoning is affecting her ability to shift. She needs Alexander. In that case, I cut her off coldly. You guys just let her fulfill her engagement to Alexander and leave me out of it. With that final thought, I severed the mind link, slamming mental barriers into place with such force that I knew Sarah would feel the rejection physically. I slammed the steering wheel hard. Running away now would solve nothing. If I was going to break free from this toxic cycle once and for all, I needed to sever all ties completely. I clenched my fists as I got out of the car once more, my decision made. Today was the day I would end it all, starting with my so-called mate. Chapter 4, Rejection. I re-entered the courtyard of the pack house. The crowd had thinned out a bit, but the rest of them were in a tight circle, their attention focused on someone in the center. As I approached, the wolves parted, sensing my presence. The scene that greeted me was so theatrical. Alexander was half kneeling on the ground, cradling Grace in his arms. Her body was slumped dramatically against his chest, her platinum blonde hair artfully arranged around her pale face. She clutched at his shirt with one hand while the other pressed against her stomach. Jason, Alexander's beta, was shouting at the onlookers. "Back to work, all of you! This isn't a spectacle!" His voice carried the authority of his position, sending the lower-ranking pack members scurrying away. Grace's eyes, those pale blue pools of calculated innocence, locked onto mine the moment I came into view. In an instant, her expression transformed from pained to desperate. She reached out with trembling fingers, grasping the hem of my skirt. "Scarlett," she whispered, her voice paper-thin. "Please. I know you're upset, but I'm not trying to come between you and Alexander." The audacity of her words made my blood boil. "I promise I won't interfere with your relationship," Grace continued, a single perfect tear sliding down her cheek. "I just need his help while I recover." Before I could respond to her ridiculous performance, Grace let out a sharp gasp. Her body convulsed, and she clutched her abdomen tightly, her face contorting in apparent agony. "It hurts," she whimpered, eyes wide with faux fear. "Your energy, it's attacking me." I hadn't moved a muscle, hadn't spoken a word. Yet somehow, according to Grace, I was magically assaulting her from 2 feet away. Alexander reacted instantly, scooping Grace into his arms in a princess carry that made my stomach lurch with disgust. Her head rested against his chest, her eyes closed in pretend suffering. "Get her out of here," Alexander barked at Jason, who rushed forward. But Grace, despite her supposed agony, managed to cling to Alexander with surprising strength. "No, Alex, please," she murmured. "I need you." Alexander hesitated, torn between his duties as alpha and his obvious concern for Grace. The look of helpless devotion on his face was the final confirmation I needed. He had never looked at me that way, not once in our 2-year engagement. I turned away from the nauseating display. "I'm going to get my bag," I announced to no one in particular, heading back toward the building. "Scarlett, stand still!" Alexander commanded, his alpha ability swirling through the air like a physical force. I felt it wash over me, completely ineffective. Without breaking stride, I continued walking. I said, "Stop!" His voice boomed louder this time, the full weight of his alpha command pressing down. Several nearby wolves dropped to their knees instinctively, but I simply kept walking. I heard Alexander's growl of frustration and the sound of his footsteps as he rushed after me, presumably after handing Grace to Jason. He caught up just as I reached the building entrance, his hand shooting out to grab my arm. I stepped neatly aside, avoiding his grasp. When I turned to face him, he flinched at whatever he saw in my eyes. "Don't touch me," I said quietly, each word clear and precise. "I reject any possibility of you becoming my mate." Shock registered on Alexander's face. Among wolves, formal rejection of a potential mate was rare and significant. It severed not just emotional bonds but mystical ones as well. Pack customs dictated that once a formal rejection was issued, no further mating ceremony could ever take place between those individuals. "You can't do that," he sputtered, disbelief coloring his tone. "Our packs." "We are completely finished, Alexander," I interrupted calmly. "Find another political solution." The finality in my voice seemed to freeze him in place. For perhaps the first time since I'd known him, Alexander Amber was speechless. I stepped around him and strode into the building, heading straight for my office. Behind me, I could hear Alexander calling my name, but I didn't look back. 5 minutes later, I drove away from the Amber Pack house, my few personal belongings tossed in the back seat of my car. Through my rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of Alexander standing in the driveway, watching me leave. Good riddance. That was quite the exit, Cora purred inside my head as I drove, clearly amused by our behavior. "Did you see his face when you formally rejected him?" I couldn't help the smile that tugged at my lips. He looked like someone had slapped him with a frozen fish. My wolf laughed, the sound warm and comforting in my mind. "He deserves worse. Years of disrespect and then cheating with that snake, Grace." I nodded, feeling Cora's power surging through my muscles, making me feel stronger, more certain of my decision. "He's trying to track us through the pack bond," Cora observed, amusement coloring her thoughts. "Look how frustrated he is." Another gift of Cora's, the ability to completely mask our location within the pack bond when needed. Not Alexander could search all he wanted. He wouldn't be able to sense where I was going. I tapped my fingers on the steering wheel. Grace must be making a big deal about all that damage right now. She thinks she needs an excuse to postpone our marking ceremony, but she doesn't realize that I press Alexander for this stupidity. Cora smiled broadly. Let her make herself anxious. The memory of Grace's innocent act made my hands tighten on the wheel. When we first met, I had a crush on her, but I didn't realize that underneath her friendly, naive exterior hid a vicious wolf. My trust allowed her to almost kill me 3 years ago. Instead of punishment, the pack had sent her to Europe to recover, while I spent months in the hospital fighting for my life. "At least now we're free of both of them," I said aloud, trying to focus on the positive. Before I could catch my breath, Luna Sarah's voice invaded my mind through our pack link. "Come home immediately," my birth mother ordered, her tone brooking no argument. "We need to discuss your behavior." I grimaced at the intrusion. I should have expected this. "There's nothing to discuss," I replied curtly. "Don't be ridiculous, Scarlett," Sarah continued, her voice softening in that manipulative way I'd come to recognize. "Alexander and Grace have history, emotional attachments that can't be erased overnight. You need to understand." I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh even to my own ears. "Understand what? How you protected her after she sent rogues to kill me?" The memories came flooding back, lying in the sanitarium for 2 months, the searing pain of my wounds, the deeper agony of betrayal as my own family chose Grace over me yet again. Sarah's tone softened further, aiming for maternal concern but missing by a mile. Grace was poisoned with silver in Europe. She suffered, which atones for her past mistakes. The marking ceremony can wait. My anger exploded all at once. "Of course," I growled through the link, my mental voice sharp enough to cause feedback. Postponing my marking, undermining my status, all for precious Grace. The same Grace who tried to get me killed, who isn't even your daughter, Luna. I could feel Sarah's shock at my bluntness. "I'll say it again," I continued before she could respond. "I'm not going to mate with Alexander, ever. The rejection is formal and final. Without waiting for her response, I snapped the connection, having Cora completely block all mind links. The sudden silence in my head was blissful. I pulled over at the border of Winters' territory, needing a moment to collect myself. The adrenaline from the confrontations was beginning to wear off, leaving me tired and oddly empty. A cold clarity enveloped me as I stared out at the landscape. I didn't want to be a pawn in their games anymore. I didn't want to fight for Sarah's motherly affection that had never been mine and never would be, no matter what I did. Sarah doesn't love me. She never did. Even after learning I was her biological daughter, she had continued to favor Grace. The admission hurt, but there was also liberation in finally accepting the truth. I reached for my phone and dialed Emma's number. She answered on the first ring, concern evident in her voice. "Scarlett, are you okay? I heard there was a scene at the Amber Pack house." I snorted. News travels fast. "Are you all right?" she pressed. "I formally rejected Alexander as my mate," I said, the words still feeling strange on my tongue. There was a brief silence, then Emma whispered, "Oh, you actually did it?" "I did, and now I need a drink." "Want to meet me at the Silver Moon?" Emma didn't hesitate. "I'll be there in 20. First round's on me." I smiled for what felt like the first time that day. Make it a double. I started the car again and headed toward the neutral zone. Chapter 5, Untamable, Scarlett's POV. The neon sign of the Silver Moon Tavern flickered as I pulled into the parking lot. Located in the neutral zone between territories, this place was frequented by wolves from different packs who wanted to conduct business or escape their alpha's watchful eyes for a while. Perfect for someone who had just formally rejected her fiancé and publicly humiliated him in front of his pack. I spotted Emma immediately as I walked through the entrance. Emma had her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, her keen eyes scanning the crowd. When she caught sight of me, her expression morphed from concern to surprise. "Scarlett!" She rushed over, embracing me tightly before pulling back to examine me. "You look completely fine?" I shrugged. "Why wouldn't I be?" Emma's eyes widened as they fixed on my beige coat. "Is that blood?" I glanced down casually at the small red spatter on my sleeve. I hadn't even noticed it during my dramatic exit. I guess it is." I ran my finger over the stain. "Not mine, though." "Not yours?" Emma's voice rose an octave. "Then whose is it?" I gave her a small, satisfied smile. "Probably Grace's or Alexander's. Things got a bit physical on my way out." Emma's jaw dropped. "You physically confronted the alpha heir and his pregnant mistress? Are you insane?" "Possibly." I couldn't help the smirk that formed on my lips. "You should have seen Alexander's face when I formally rejected him." Emma stared at me for a long moment before breaking into incredulous laughter. "I can't believe you actually did it." Her eyes sparkled with admiration. "I thought I'd find you crying into your wine glass, but here you are looking like you just won the lottery." I ran a hand through my hair. "I feel like I did. Finally, free of that arrogant ass and his scheming sister." Emma shook her head, still reeling from my surprising demeanor. "I have to say, you really surprised me, my dear. You know Alexander isn't just any wolf. He's the alpha heir, eh? And Grace. We all know what she's capable of." The memory of Grace's orchestrated attack 3 years ago flashed through my mind, the searing pain of silver-tipped claws tearing through my flesh, the burning agony as poison seeped into my veins. "They don't scare me anymore," I said firmly, pushing the memories away. Emma squeezed my arm. "Good. It's about time someone stood up to them." She glanced around the busy tavern. "Let's skip the small talk and get to our table. I'm starving, and I'm guessing you could use a drink." "Make it a double," I agreed, following her through the crowded room. The Silver Moon was packed tonight, filled with wolves from various packs mingling together. A few heads turned as we passed, whispers following in our wake. News traveled fast in the wolf community. We settled into a corner booth, far enough from other patrons to have a private conversation. Emma flagged down a waitress and ordered us both whiskeys and steaks. "Medium rare for me," I specified. When our meals arrived, I found myself struggling with the tough cut of meat. My knife scraped against the plate as I attempted to slice through the overcooked steak. "This is ridiculous," I muttered, setting down my utensils in frustration. "I prefer rabbit anyway, something I can tear into with my teeth." Emma chuckled. I'll take you to my favorite rabbit roast next time. Sorry about this place. Your message was so urgent I didn't have time to make reservations anywhere better. It's fine. I took a long sip of whiskey, savoring the burn as it slid down my throat. The alcohol makes up for the disappointing food. Emma leaned forward, lowering her voice. So what's your next move? Alexander isn't going to let this go easily? I didn't hesitate. I'm going to officially cancel the marking ceremony. I want you to spread the word to all the packs. Emma nearly choked on her drink. You're serious? Did the Winter Pack and Amber Pack agree to this? I smiled coldly. I don't need their agreement. The decision is mine. Scarlett. Emma's voice held a note of warning. This isn't just about you and Alexander. This is about politics between two major packs. I shrugged, unconcerned. Then they can find another political solution. I'm done being their bargaining chip. Emma sat back, studying me with newfound respect. You've changed. A year ago, you wouldn't have dared defy both packs like this. She was right. For years, I had been desperately seeking approval, especially from my birth parents who had chosen Grace over me even after discovering the truth about our switched identities. I've wasted enough time trying to be what they wanted, I said, my voice hardening. Look where that got me, engaged to a man who cheated on me with my adopted sister, the same woman who tried to have me killed. Emma nodded slowly. I remember when they first arranged the mating. Her words transported me back to that time. After Grace orchestrated the rogue attack that nearly killed me, there had been a brief moment when it seemed justice might prevail. Alexander had appeared to take my side, condemning Grace's actions. I had been so pathetically grateful for his support that I'd agreed when the Winter Pack suggested a mating bond between us. The alliance would strengthen both packs, they said. It would stabilize my position within the Winter Pack, they promised. What a fool I'd been. Alexander never meant to see Grace punished, I said bitterly. He was playing politics, making sure the arrangement went through while protecting her at the same time. Emma's expression darkened with anger. That two-faced bastard. I never trusted him. Well, now he can have Grace with my blessing, I replied, draining my glass. They deserve each other. Emma hesitated, then asked carefully, Why did you go along with it for so long, Scarlett? You even participated in the preparations for the marking ceremony. The question struck deep. I couldn't tell Emma the real reason, how desperately lonely I'd been after leaving Roman and my adoptive mother. How I'd craved belonging and acceptance from my birth family, even knowing they would never truly love me as they loved Grace. Instead, I deflected. It doesn't matter now. What matters is ending this farce completely. Emma nodded, accepting my non-answer. What can I do to help? Post about Alexander and Grace's visit to the hospital on the pack forums, I said. Make it clear they were there for a gynecological appointment, not for silver poisoning treatment. Emma's eyes lit up with mischievous determination. Consider it done. She pulled out her phone and began typing rapidly. As an apprentice pack healer, Emma had credibility within the medical community. Combined with her popularity among younger pack members, her posts on the forums would spread like wildfire. I'm not just posting about their hospital visit, she informed me, fingers flying across the screen. I'm also announcing your decision to cancel the marking ceremony. I smiled approvingly. Perfect. Within 30 minutes, Emma had created a detailed post, complete with the exact time Alexander and Grace had visited the OBGYN. She even mentioned how they'd been discussing pregnancy symptoms with the doctor. And posted, she said triumphantly. Almost immediately, her phone began buzzing with notifications. Wow, it's blowing up, Emma said, scrolling through the responses. People are shocked, but not that surprised, if that makes sense. Apparently there have been rumors about Alexander and Grace for months. Of course there have been, I scoffed. They were probably sleeping together the entire time I was planning the marking ceremony. My phone suddenly vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out to see Alexander's name flashing on the screen. I showed it to Emma, who raised her eyebrows. That was fast, I answered, putting the phone on speaker so Emma could hear. What do you want, Alexander? I asked coldly. What the f*** do you think you're doing? His voice thundered through the speaker, loud enough to make nearby patrons turn their heads. Speaking publicly about my decision, I replied calmly. Is there a problem? You had no right, he began, but I cut him off. I had every right. I formally rejected you as my mate. The marking ceremony is cancelled. His breathing became heavy, a sure sign he was struggling to control his temper. You're making a serious mistake, Scarlett. If you think you can humiliate me like this— I already have, I interrupted again, and there's nothing you can do about it. Alexander's voice dropped to a dangerous growl. If you don't come home right now and fix this mess, I'll kick your apartment door down and trash the place myself. Emma's eyes widened at the threat, but I remained unfazed. Try it, I challenged. Give me one more reason to file a formal complaint against you with the Pack Council. There was a moment of stunned silence before Alexander exploded. This isn't over, Scarlett. You think you can just walk away? I will destroy everything you care about. I hung up without responding and turned to Emma, who looked both shocked and impressed. Well, she said, raising her glass in a toast, here's to burning bridges spectacularly. I clinked my glass against hers. To new beginnings, I replied. Chapter 6, Get Out. My phone vibrated against the table for what felt like the 100th time in the past hour. Emma glanced at the screen and rolled her eyes. Another unknown number, she said, sliding the device toward me. That's the 8th one. Luna Sarah must be getting desperate. I watched the phone buzz with tired disinterest. This was Sarah's favorite tactic, having various pack members call me when I refused to answer her directly. Just turn the damn thing off, Emma suggested, taking a sip of her third whiskey. They'll get the message eventually. You know what? You're right. I grabbed the phone and powered it down with a satisfying press. The silence felt like a luxury after hours of incessant ringing. To peace and quiet, I said, raising my glass. Should we get the check? Emma asked, signaling to our waitress. I nodded, reaching for my purse. This one's on me. You've been a lifesaver today. The waitress brought our bill, and I pulled out my card linked to my winter pack account. It was a formality more than anything else. Each pack member had an account tied to their position, managed by the Alpha or Luna. I handed over my card and waited. The waitress returned moments later with an apologetic expression. I'm sorry, ma'am. Your card has been declined. I raised an eyebrow, pulling out my phone and turning it back on. Sure enough, a notification appeared immediately. Your pack account has been frozen. Contact Luna Sarah for details. Emma's face flushed with anger. Are you kidding me? They froze your account? I slipped the phone back into my pocket with a shrug. Not the first time. That's ridiculous. You're a pack member, their biological daughter, for moon's sake. Emma's voice rose slightly, drawing attention from nearby tables. And they have the nerve to freeze your funds while Grace, who doesn't even have real pack blood, probably has unlimited access. It's fine, I said, keeping my voice level. It's not fine, Emma insisted, already pulling out her own card. I'll cover this, and I can transfer some funds from my Healing Apprentice savings if you need. Don't worry about it, I cut her off gently. I have my own resources. Emma looked skeptical as she handed her card to the waitress. What resources? Everything you had was tied to either the winter pack or Alexander's connections, wasn't it? I allowed a small, secretive smile to play at my lips. Not everything. You're going to have to explain this, Emma said an hour later, standing in the middle of an exclusive boutique in the neutral territory. After paying for our meal at the tavern, I'd suggested we go shopping, partly to celebrate my newfound freedom, partly to prove a point. I ran my fingers over a silk blouse that probably cost more than most wolves made in a week. Explain what? Emma gestured wildly at our surroundings, a high-end shop that catered exclusively to the wolf elite. This! How can you afford to shop here when your pack account is frozen? I smiled and pulled the blouse off the rack, adding it to the growing pile in my arms. I told you I have my own resources, I replied, examining a pair of designer jeans. Emma crossed her arms. You're being deliberately cryptic. Maybe I just enjoy the mystery, I teased. We continued shopping, with Emma begrudgingly selecting a few items for herself after I insisted. When we approached the counter, the pile of clothes, accessories, and even some rare herbal supplies for my collection had grown impressively large. The saleswoman tallied our purchases, her eyes widening at the final amount. That will be $7,142, ma'am. Emma choked slightly beside me. I reached into my purse and pulled out a sleek black card that bore no pack insignia. The saleswoman's eyes brightened with recognition. "Of course, Miss Winters. Right away." She processed the transaction without hesitation, handling the unmarked card with noticeable respect. Emma stared at me, her jaw slack. "What was that?" I slipped the card back into my purse as the saleswoman arranged our purchases in elegant shopping bags. "Just a card." "That's not just a card," Emma whispered as we collected our bags. "That's a black card. They don't give those to just anyone, and they certainly don't come from PAC accounts." I shrugged, enjoying her confusion. "Like I said, I have my own resources." Once outside the boutique, Emma stopped me with a hand on my arm. "Seriously, Scarlett, where did that card come from? Did Alexander give it to you as part of your mating arrangement?" "Alexander?" I nearly laughed at the absurdity. "Absolutely not." "Then who?" Emma pressed. "Who would give you that kind of financial freedom?" Something must have changed in my expression because Emma's eyes widened with realization. "Oh my goddess, it's from someone else, isn't it? Someone important to you." I actually didn't notice I was holding the card at first, but as the memory surfaced, I felt my face involuntarily soften. The look on Roman's face that day when he gave me the card was the only thing I'd been thinking about all these years. It doesn't matter," I said, pushing the memory away and forcing lightness into my tone. "What matters is that Luna Sarah's little power play failed spectacularly." Emma clearly wanted to press further, but she recognized my deflection for what it was. Instead, she hefted her shopping bags with a grin. "Well, I can't argue with the results. This is the most expensive outfit I've ever owned." We parted ways shortly after, with Emma heading back to the Winters territory, with promises to keep me updated on any PAC gossip. I approached my apartment building in the neutral territory, with arms loaded with shopping bags. This place had been my sanctuary for the past year, neither in Winters nor Amber territory, but a space that was truly mine. As I rounded the corner to my door, a familiar scent hit my nostrils seconds before I spotted him. Alexander stood leaning against my doorframe, arms crossed over his broad chest. His amber eyes flashed with irritation when he saw me. "Finally," he growled, pushing away from the wall. "I've been waiting for 2 hours." I raised an eyebrow, continuing toward my door at the same unhurried pace. "How unfortunate for you." His gaze dropped to my shopping bags, a sneer forming on his handsome face. "Shopping? Really? The entire PAC has been trying to reach you, and you've been buying clothes?" "You seemed busy with Grace," I replied coolly. "I didn't want to interrupt your precious time together." Alexander stepped closer, his tall frame blocking my path to the door. "Why did you turn off your cell phone? Why did you block the mind link?" I met his gaze steadily. It was too loud. I wanted some peace and quiet. His jaw tightened with frustration. "This isn't a game, Scarlett. There are consequences to your actions today." "Speaking of actions," I said, looking pointedly at my door, "didn't you say you were going to trash my apartment? Why haven't you gone in yet?" Alexander's nostrils flared with anger. "I was giving you the courtesy of facing me first, but clearly you're too insensitive to appreciate that." I laughed, the sound deliberately mocking. "How considerate of you. Tell me, do you extend the same courtesy to Grace, or did you rush straight to her side earlier?" My words hit their mark. Alexander's anger visibly rose, his control slipping as Mason, his wolf, pushed to the surface. His eyes flashed with alpha power. "We need to have a serious conversation about our arrangement," he said, his voice dropping to that commanding tone he used with his subordinates. "The PAC alliance." "There is no arrangement anymore," I cut him off. "I rejected you publicly, or did you forget that part?" I moved to step around him and reach my door, but his hand shot out, gripping my wrist with punishing force. His touch sent a wave of alpha authority through my skin, a power that would have brought most wolves to their knees. But not me. Never me. I looked down at his hand, then up at his face. My voice dropped to an icy whisper. "Remove your hand, or I'll remove it for you." "You're being unreasonable," he snarled. "This affects both our PACs. You can't just—" I didn't let him finish. Cora's strength flowed through me, and I broke his grip with ease, surprising him with my strength. His eyes widened slightly. He'd always underestimated me physically. When he positioned himself to block my doorway, My patience evaporated completely. With precision born from years of training, I delivered a swift, targeted kick between his legs. Alexander doubled over instantly, a strangled sound escaping his throat. Before he could recover, my hand transformed, wolf claws extending as I slashed across his neck, just deep enough to make my point without causing permanent damage. He stumbled back, hand flying to the wound. It wasn't lethal. Werewolf healing would take care of it within minutes, but the message was clear. I unlocked my door and stepped inside, but Alexander, stubborn as ever, followed me in uninvited. His healing had already stopped the bleeding, though his face remained pale with shock and anger. "What the hell are you?" Alexander asked, frustration evident in his voice. "No wolf can resist an alpha command like you do. No female should have this kind of strength." "Perhaps you never really knew me at all," I replied coldly. Alexander's face twisted with fury and a hint of something else. Fear, perhaps. "You're wild, uncontrolled. This is why you're unworthy of being my Luna." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a cruel whisper. "No man would ever want you as a mate again. Not after today." His words revealed his growing inability to control or intimidate me the way he did with the rest of the pack. And that, more than anything, terrified him. Chapter 7. My Territory. Alexander's words hung in the air between us, sharp and venomous. "No man would ever want you as a mate again. Not after today." Something snapped inside me. His words weren't just cruel, they were hauntingly familiar. My mind flashed back to 3 years ago, standing in the Thornpack house, tears streaming down my face as I packed my belongings. "No one will ever want you as a mate." That woman's voice, filled with mockery as she watched me preparing to leave Roman. The same words, the same contemptuous tone. White-hot rage flooded through me. Before I could think, my hand shot out and grabbed Alexander's wrist. I squeezed hard enough that I felt the bones grind together. "You don't know anything about me," I snarled, my voice barely recognizable. Cora's power surged through me unrestrained, and I felt rather than saw Alexander's shock as the wave of my anger hit him. His eyes widened, pupils dilating with a mixture of pain and something else, fear. "Scarlett," he gasped, raising his free hand in surrender. "I didn't come here to fight." I tightened my grip, enjoying the way his face paled. "Then why are you here?" "To apologize," he said quickly. "To communicate properly. I don't want to argue, much less fight with you." The desperation in his voice was satisfying, but I wasn't in the mood for his games. I released his wrist, shoving him away from me. "Then talk. Quickly." I crossed my arms, keeping my distance. Alexander rubbed his wrist, trying to regain his composure. He moved to my couch and sat down, attempting to reclaim some authority through posture. From his pocket, he pulled out an expensive cigar. "Don't," I warned as he reached for his lighter. He ignored me, flicking the lighter and bringing the flame toward the cigar. In one swift motion, I crossed the room and snatched it from his hands, crushing it in my palm. The ember burned my skin, but I didn't flinch. "This is my place," I said, my voice deadly calm as I dropped the destroyed cigar onto the floor. "I call the shots. Smoke again and get out." Alexander's jaw clenched tight, a muscle twitching at his temple. I could read the struggle on his face. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by a female wolf. Grace had conditioned him to expect perfect obedience wrapped in delicate feminine packaging. "You've changed," he said finally. "For 3 years you've been mild-tempered, accommodating." I laughed, the sound harsh and humorless. "I wasn't mild-tempered, I was too lazy to bother with you. It was all an act." His eyes narrowed, clearly not believing me. "All of it? For 3 years?" "You only saw what you wanted to see," I replied coldly. "A submissive female willing to play her part in your political theater." That seemed to intensify his irritation. His nostrils flared as he inhaled deeply, attempting to control his temper. "You and your friend Emma have caused quite the scandal," Alexander finally spoke, his voice deceptively calm. "Publicly rejecting a mate bond? Spreading rumors about Grace through pack channels?" His amber eyes flashed dangerously, but I refused to be intimidated. "Rumors?" My cold laugh cut through the tension. "You mean the truth about your precious Grace's condition?" I stepped closer, letting Cora's power radiate from me in waves. Alexander might be physically larger, but in this moment I knew I was the more dangerous predator. "Or were you planning to keep her pregnancy secret while marking me?" I continued, watching his face contort with anger. Going to juggle two mates, Alexander? His growl reverberated through the room, deep and threatening. To any other wolf, it would have been terrifying, a clear warning from an alpha about to lose control. But I remained unmoved, meeting his gaze steadily. Don't blame Emma for exposing what you couldn't hide, I said. If not her, Grace's own pack healer would have revealed it soon enough. The truth in my words only fueled his anger. Alexander surged to his feet, his massive frame towering over me as his alpha power pulsed through the room like a physical force. You will not speak of Grace that way, he commanded, the full weight of his alpha voice pressing down. He'd forgotten, in his rage, that his alpha voice held no sway over me. It never had. My emerald eyes blazed as Cora's power rose to match his. Our energies collided in the small space of my apartment, creating an almost electrical charge in the air. I'll speak truth whether you like it or not, I snarled back, not giving an inch. Your precious Grace, the perfect Luna-to-be, who sent rogues after me 3 years ago. The same Grace you're protecting while trying to force a mate bond with me for political gain. Each word struck like a physical blow. I could see Alexander flinch despite his attempt to maintain control. The truth hurt more than any claw or fang could. You don't know what you're talking about, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Don't I? I stepped even closer, my face inches from his. I have the scars to prove it. Silver-tipped claws, Alexander. Do you know what that feels like? To have poison burning through your veins while you bleed out? His eyes flickered with something. Guilt, perhaps, or shame. Good. He should feel both. Grace was punished, he said weakly. She was sent away. Punished. I laughed bitterly. She was sent on a European vacation while I fought for my life in a hospital bed. And now she's back, pregnant with your child, and everyone expects me to just accept it? The tension between us crackled with unresolved power, neither willing to back down from our position. We stood locked in this silent battle, alpha power against whatever strange force lived within me. Finally, I'd had enough. I don't think we have anything more to talk about, I said, my voice suddenly tired. If you don't want me to post on the forums about Grace hiring a rogue wolf to attack me, please leave my house. Alexander looked like he wanted to argue further, but something in my expression must have warned him against it. His shoulders slumped slightly, the first sign of defeat I'd ever seen in him. This isn't over, Scarlett, he said, moving toward the door. It is for me, I replied coldly. He paused with his hand on the doorknob, turning to look at me one last time. For a moment, I thought I saw something like regret in his eyes. You could have been great, he said quietly. The strongest Luna the Northern Territories had ever seen. I met his gaze without wavering. I still will be, just not yours. Without another word, Alexander left, the door clicking shut behind him. Only when I was sure he was gone did I allow myself to sink onto the couch, the adrenaline draining from my body. Cora stirred restlessly within me. He's right about one thing, she murmured in my mind. We've started a war. Let them come, I whispered aloud, rubbing absently at the small burn on my palm where I'd crushed Alexander's cigar. I'm done hiding what I am. My phone buzzed from where I'd tossed it on the coffee table. I glanced at the screen to see Emma's name flashing. Things are going crazy here, she said when I answered. Sarah is on a rampage, and Alexander's father is demanding an emergency pack council meeting. I closed my eyes, suddenly exhausted. Let them rage. I'm not going back. Are you sure about this, Scarlett? Emma's voice was concerned. Once this bridge is fully burned. It should have been burned 3 years ago, I said firmly, when they chose Grace over justice. After hanging up, I walked to the window and stared out at the darkening sky. The moon was rising, nearly full. In 2 nights, it would reach its peak, and with it, my power. I thought of Roman, wondering if he ever looked at the same moon and thought of me, of the life we might have had if things had been different. My hand moved to the small crescent birthmark on my shoulder, the mark that identified me as a true daughter of the Winters pack, though few knew its significance. It tingled slightly under my touch, as if responding to my thoughts. Chapter 8. Miscalculated. I turned from the door and walked out of Scarlett's house, her cold laugh ringing in my ears. My chest heaved as I tried to steady my breathing. Anger coursed through my veins like fire, burning hotter with each step. my fists clenched at my sides. The moment I slid into the driver's seat of my car, I slammed the door shut so hard it rattled the frame. Mason, my wolf, was pacing furiously inside me, his growls echoing in the back of my mind. "She mocked us," Mason snarled. "She dared to reject us. Us!" My grip tightened on the steering wheel, my knuckles stark white. Mason's outrage mirrored my own, but there was something else beneath it, a gnawing uncertainty I refused to acknowledge. Jason's voice pushed into our link cautiously. "Alpha? Has Scarlett calmed down?" His tone made it clear he had no idea what had really happened back there. He thought this was just one of Scarlett's fits, perhaps a ploy to convince me to banish Grace after all. "She hasn't," I said shortly, my tone making it clear I didn't want to talk. "She will," Jason reassured me confidently. "She has to. She can't risk losing her place in the Winters pack. Her position is too vulnerable. She has nowhere else to go." I wanted to agree. It made logical sense. Scarlett had always been careful, quiet, careful not to rock the boat too much. Her position in the pack was delicate. She wouldn't want to risk everything on a whim. But logic warred with memory. I closed my eyes, and all I could see were her blazing emerald eyes. Mason stirred uncomfortably at the thought. "She's different," Mason growled again, quieter this time, almost grudgingly. "We can feel it. She's not the same docile Luna we knew. She resists us." "She'll come back," I murmured, more to myself than anyone else. Mason didn't respond, and his silence was unsettling. Later that evening, I tried drowning myself in work. Pack matters, supply shipments, border patrol schedules, dispute resolutions, basic, mundane administrative responsibilities. My beta Jason sat across from me, rattling off updates, but I barely heard him. My thoughts kept drifting back to her. The way she had thrown off my alpha command as if it were nothing, her look of cold defiance, the way she dismissed me as if I were beneath her notice. "She'll regret it," I muttered under my breath. Jason paused, looking up from his notes. "Alpha?" Before I could answer him, the door burst open. Jason jumped to his feet, his hand instinctively reaching for the small blade at his hip, but he froze when he saw the face of our latest intruder. It was one of my men, his face pale and shaky. Whatever he had to say, it was big. "Hunter Stone," he stammered, his breathing labored, "from the Thorn Pack. He's at the borders." The name hit me like a slap. Thorn Pack. I sat up straighter, my full attention now on the messenger. "Hunter Stone?" "Yes, Alpha." The young wolf stepped fully into the room now, his hands trembling slightly. "He's requesting a business meeting." Jason looked confused, glancing between me and the messenger. "The Thorn Pack? They don't meddle in politics here," I said slowly, piecing it together. "What does he want?" The wolf licked his lips nervously. "It's about Scarlett's healing center." Heat exploded in my chest. There it was again, Scarlett. Her name always seemed to circle back into everything. Jason raised an eyebrow. "Since when does the Thorn Pack care about healing contracts? That's not their style." "They offered a contract," the wolf continued, his voice dropping as if the words themselves shocked him. "It's worth triple what we usually deal with." My thoughts raced, each one louder than the last. "Triple?" "Yes, Alpha, but only if the deal is done directly through Scarlett." Hunter refused to negotiate with anyone else. Jason's voice cut through my haze of confusion. "That doesn't make any sense. Why her? It's not like Scarlett's running a major pack operation. The Thorn Pack doesn't get involved in trivial matters. Why would they need her specifically?" I didn't have an answer. But inside me, Mason growled low, unsettled. "They know something," he said darkly. "There's more to her, Alexander, more than we've allowed ourselves to see." I bit back a sharp retort at my own wolf's words, but his unease twisted around mine, drawing connections I didn't want to make yet. It couldn't be a coincidence. Her immunity to my alpha power, her sudden rebellion. Now the Thorn Pack was sniffing around, offering her deals worth more than most packs earn in 6 months. "What other secrets is she hiding?" I muttered, my voice rough. Before I could dwell further, Grace walked into the office, her soft perfume washing over me. A mix of sweetness and something new, something distinctly maternal. I stiffened. So did Mason. "Alexander," she called out, her voice as delicate as ever. "Is everything all right? You seem—" She faltered, her pale brows furrowing in concern. Distracted. Her frailty, her softness, her eternal performance, and for once I felt nothing but cold frustration. Scarlett is becoming a problem, I said bluntly, cutting through Grace's act. The pack council chamber was stifling, both in heat and in tension. I sat carefully in the corner, my hands folded delicately in my lap. My posture was perfect, just enough to suggest that I was distressed but still composed. Scarlett's name filled the air like some cursed mantra. Every conversation circled back to her. Her behavior. Her defiance. This cannot go on. Alpha Marcus Winters' voice thundered through the room, his imposing frame adding weight to his words. If Scarlett continues like this, she will tear this pack apart. I dabbed lightly at my eyes with a tissue, allowing my lower lip to tremble just enough to fuel my carefully crafted appearance. I didn't mean to cause trouble, I whispered softly, shaking my head. I only wanted peace. And she... My voice broke as if I couldn't finish. Sarah, ever the devoted Luna, leaned forward with a sharp look. Scarlett's reckless behavior leaves us no choice. I've revoked her access to all resources, hunting grounds, training areas, even healing supplies. Daniel Winter, the pack's weak-willed heir, nodded in approval. Good. That'll force her to submit. I tilted my head slightly, pretending to study my hands, but inside I smiled. These fools were so predictable. They all believed Scarlett would come crawling back, begging for leniency. But something gnawed at the edges of my victory. The memory of Scarlett's emerald eyes burning with an otherworldly light haunted me. I don't think this is enough, a soft voice murmured hesitantly. All heads turned to a younger pack member at the far end of the room. His voice betrayed his nervousness. What do you mean? Daniel barked. The young wolf hesitated, shrinking slightly under the collective weight of the council's gaze. Her eyes. They didn't just glow, it was like they burned. Nonsense, Sarah snapped. But the unease lingered. Even as the council moved toward a unanimous agreement to punish Scarlett further, my mind drifted. She had radiated something unfamiliar, something powerful. Maybe all of us, myself included, had underestimated her, but no matter. Her defiance only made her more dangerous, more necessary to crush. When the council finally adjourned, Sarah grabbed Marcus's phone with sharp efficiency. "We're calling Scarlett," she announced. I stayed seated, watching as the call connected. "Scarlett," Sarah began, her voice cold. "This ends now. Stop targeting Grace or you'll be cut off completely. No pack privileges, no resources. You'll lose everything." To everyone's shock, Scarlett responded with a laugh, a sound so sharp and cold I shivered involuntarily. Sarah's composure faltered for a brief moment. "Do you think this is a joke?" she hissed. Scarlett's response was lethal. "Go ahead. Cut me off. I don't need you." And then, impossibly, the call disconnected. No wolf should have been able to sever a direct link with the pack. The room fell into stunned silence. I leaned forward slightly, adding just the right amount of tremble to my voice as I spoke next. "Scarlett, please." "No," Scarlett snarled coldly through the line that hadn't been fully cut after all. "Save your pathetic lies. Don't waste your fake apologies on me." The tears in my voice were carefully placed. I didn't want this. I never wanted this fight between us. I only wanted things to be peaceful. Peaceful? Scarlett's laugh was bitter, almost hollow. The connection broke for good this time. Daniel exploded. "She's gone insane. How can she speak to us like that? To Grace? After everything Grace has endured." Others quickly followed, their voices layering over one another. Condemnation of Scarlett filled the air. Brash words of rage and disdain tangled among themselves. "She's damaging the pack's unity. She's reckless, ungrateful, wild. She must apologize." But I couldn't focus on their words. My mind played Scarlett's voice on loop. Cold, unfeeling, confident. I touched my lips lightly, my mind racing with doubt for the first time. Had I miscalculated? Was there more to her than I'd ever known? Uncertainty was a feeling I had grown unaccustomed to. Yet now it wrapped around me like ice. Chapter 9, Disregard the Order. The council hall of the Winters pack had always carried a sense of power, but today there was an extra tension, thick like the heat of a storm. I sat quietly in my usual place, deliberately leaning back in my seat, feigning a fragile air. Beneath my calm exterior, I was anything but fragile. Behind my lowered lashes, I assessed the room with care. Sarah, seated beside Marcus at the head of the table, was speaking in her usual commanding tone. Her words fell like hammers, breaking the silence harshly. She hung up on me, just like that, as if I were nothing. Sarah slapped her hand against the oak table for emphasis, her pale face growing flushed with anger. She didn't even hesitate, Sarah continued, rubbing her temple as if it pained her to admit. Scarlett's behavior has grown out of control. She openly disregards the order of this pack. I couldn't suppress the faint smile tugging at the corner of my lips, but I turned it into a soft cough, delicate and weak. All eyes shifted toward me, or rather toward the frail appearance I worked so carefully to maintain. "Grace, are you all right?" Sarah asked quickly, her anger evaporating in an instant as she turned toward me. Her hand was warm and firm as she patted my back in comfort. "Yes, Luna Sarah," I murmured softly, offering her a faint, grateful smile. "You're too kind to worry. Please, don't let me distract from what's important." Sarah's concern deepened. She kept her hand on my back as though I might collapse at any moment, her attention torn between me and the issues at hand. "We must do something about Scarlett," she said, her tone sharp again. Daniel, seated near the center of the table, seized the moment. His expression lit with malicious excitement as he leaned forward, his elbows resting on the polished surface of the table. "We need to act immediately," he said, his voice eager. "No more leniency. Revoke her access, hunting grounds, sacred lands, everything. Cut her off." His suggestion hung in the air like bait, all eyes shifting toward Marcus for approval. I kept my gaze down, appearing quietly distressed, but I listened intently. Another cough escaped my lips, this one louder than before. Sarah immediately turned back to me, her concern intensifying. "Grace, are you sure you're all right?" Still weakly coughing, I nodded. "Just a slight spell," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I hate to interrupt." "It's this stress," Sarah said firmly. "It's affecting your condition. You shouldn't have to endure this." She turned an almost accusatory glance toward her mate. Marcus remained silent, his hands resting heavily on the table. His jaw worked, his muted tension speaking volumes. But when Sarah continued, suggesting even more measures to limit Scarlett's place in the pack, including severing financial support, Marcus finally nodded his agreement. "It needs to come to an end," Marcus said simply, his tone firm but devoid of emotion. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep my real reaction at bay. Inside, I was thrilled. Joy rippled through me, and for a brief moment I could feel the mate bond connecting me and Alexander pushing stronger. His frustrations with Scarlett echoed faintly in the back of my mind. The connection only bolstered my confidence. The wolf pack had no room for two Lunas, and soon Scarlett's place in it would be nothing but a memory. The afternoon sunlight poured through the large windows of my healing center, illuminating the rows of meticulously labeled herbal jars lining the walls. The faint scent of lavender and fresh-cut eucalyptus filled the room as I sealed the last of the jars in front of me. Claire, my secretary, leaned into the room with her usual quiet presence. "Miss Winters," she said, holding a clipboard close to her chest. "The new shipment of wolfsbane just arrived." "Perfect. Make sure it's placed in the secure vault and cataloged before the evening shift begins." I didn't look up as I jotted notes onto the clipboard, taking one last scan through the inventory list before handing it back to her. Claire hesitated briefly before nodding and quickly leaving the room. It wasn't until I was alone that I allowed myself to pause, laying down my pen and exhaling slowly. Sarah's phone call still lingered in my mind, though not for emotional reasons, more tactical ones. Her threatening tone and domineering bravado hadn't fazed me in the slightest, but it did confirm just how far she was willing to go. Even as I stood in the middle of my healing center, the one place that brought me calm, my mind couldn't ignore the growing attempts of the Winters pack to suffocate me. After signing off on the final contracts for the new shipment, I texted Emma, "Silver Moon Tavern, 8 p.m., drinks on me." Driving to the neutral territory where the Silver Moon Tavern sat wasn't far, but it was far enough that the Winters territory faded in my rearview mirror. As I navigated the quiet streets, a flash of movement caught my attention from the side mirror. I glanced again and confirmed what I'd already suspected. The dark sedan had been following me for several blocks now. A small chuckle escaped my lips as I refocused on the road. "Grace's lackeys. Amateur," I muttered under my breath. Driving beyond the well-trafficked main road, I veered down a sharp, unfamiliar turn. The sedan followed. They weren't subtle or particularly skilled. Picking up speed, I led them through a series of narrow alleys and side streets where familiarity was scarce for outsiders. Cora, my wolf, watched with amusement. "They're pathetic," she said inside my mind, her voice tinged with smugness. After 2 turns and 1 strategically placed U-turn, they were gone. Just like that. It was almost too easy. The worn leather seating of the Silver Moon Tavern was a welcome sight after the chaos of the day. Emma was already waiting at our corner booth with 2 glasses of bright amber liquid placed neatly between us. Her dark green sweater matched her vibrant eyes, which immediately flicked over my face as I slid into the seat across from her. "Rough day?" she asked, her tone half joking, but her eyes sharp. "Let's just say Grace's spies aren't exactly subtle," I replied, smirking as I raised the glass to my lips. Didn't even take me 5 minutes to lose them. "She's getting desperate." Emma leaned in closer, lowering her voice slightly. "But that's not why I've been dying to talk to you. I heard something unusual." I took a sip, raising an eyebrow. "Go on." "Hunter Stone," she began, her tone weighty. "The beta of the Briar Pack. Word is he's been sniffing around healing centers near neutral territories, more importantly, yours." I placed my glass down carefully before leaning back in my seat, adjusting my position. "It's no rumor. He's reached out about a potential business arrangement." Emma's jaw dropped. "Business arrangement? Scarlett, that's not nothing. What does he want with your healing center?" "Herbs," I said simply, though my tone betrayed just a hint of avoidance. Emma wasn't convinced, her sharp eyes narrowing at my vague response. "And nothing else? No ulterior motives?" she pressed. "The Briar Pack is resourceful," I replied smoothly. "They're smart to go where they'll get the best supplies." Emma's sharp gaze analyzed every flick of my expression, and I knew she wasn't buying the veiled explanation. "There's something you're not telling me," she murmured, crossing her arms. "What is it?" Instead of answering directly, I pulled out a small leather-bound ledger from my bag and slid it across the table toward her. "Take a look." Emma opened it, her eyes growing wider with every page she flipped. "These are sales reports?" she asked. "Detailed over the last fiscal year," I confirmed, savoring the look of stunned awe on her face. "The healing center doesn't just cater to the Winters Pack. It never has." Emma's mouth dropped open further. "These numbers. Scarlett, this is—" "It's more than the Winters Pack's entire annual revenue," I interrupted, smirking. "I don't rely on them, or Alexander." "Haven't for a long time." Emma sat in her seat, her expression a mix of pride and shock. It took her a moment to find her voice again. "The Shadow Clan," she said softly, realization dawning. "That's why you've been so untouchable. You're tied to something much larger than the Pack." "They're one of many," I said, easing into a more casual tone. "Wolf's Bane is in high demand, and I make sure we're the best at what we do." Emma exhaled, still reeling. "No wonder you don't care about Sarah cutting off your access. You don't need it." She shook her head in admiration before her tone shifted, curious again. "But why bring Hunterstone into the mix? What does he want, and why now?" The question hung in the air, but my response didn't come. Instead, I took another sip from my drink and simply said, "It's complicated." Emma wasn't satisfied with my answer, and I could see the follow-up questions forming on her lips. Rather than let her press further, I decided to change the subject. "Haven't seen Hazel in a while," I said casually. "Have you?" "Hazel is our common friend, a brilliant healer." Emma blinked at the abrupt shift, but finally went along with it. "Hazel? Oh, goddess, no-go? It's been weeks. She mentioned something about a research breakthrough, but I haven't had time to check in." I nodded, a small smile tugging at my lips. "She's brilliant. A shame we don't see her more often." "Seriously," Emma agreed. Her tense shoulders visibly relaxed as she leaned back in her seat. "Have you heard how her experiments with enchanted hemlock are going?" "No idea," I admitted with genuine curiosity. "We should visit her soon. I'm dying to know what she's cooking up." Emma laughed softly, the sound finally light after our heavier discussion. "You, me, Hazel, proper girls' night, just herbs and endless experiments." Chapter 10. Confrontations and Regrets. Emma's brow furrowed as she leaned forward, her glass of amber liquid untouched in her hand. "Scarlett, there's something I need your help with," she said, her voice low but firm. I raised an eyebrow at her serious tone. "What is it?" I asked, setting my glass down and giving her my full attention. Emma hesitated for a moment, her eyes flickering with worry. She sighed and then spoke. "It's Timothy, my cousin." She bit her lip, looking uncertain. "He's in a really bad way." "Go on," I prompted gently, though my wolf Cora already stirred with interest. Something about Emma's tone made me uneasy. "Timothy's an Omega in the chase pack," Emma explained, her hands wrapping around her glass tightly. 3 months ago, he got into some kind of fight with rogues, and they cursed him. I stiffened at that. Curses weren't things to take lightly. Emma swallowed hard and continued. "He can't shift properly anymore. It's like his body gets stuck halfway through, and the pain is unbearable. He even passed out during a training session last week." She looked at me with pleading eyes. "I wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious, Scarlett. I think you're the only person who can really assess what's wrong with him." I leaned back in my seat, tapping my finger against the edge of the glass as I thought. A curse affecting shifting? That's rare. Even advanced healers don't encounter that kind of thing often. "It's more than rare. It's a nightmare," Emma said urgently. "One of the healers suggested some herbs, but nothing worked. Now I've heard whispers about a potion from the stone pack. Apparently, they've developed something new." I frowned at that. "You want to try a potion for this?" I hesitated, my natural instincts warning against such quick fixes. "Those things can have side effects, Emma. They don't always work the way you want them to." Emma's expression softened, but her voice stayed firm. "I know how you feel about these shortcuts, Scarlett. I get it, but Timothy doesn't have much time. Every failed shift takes more out of him. He's losing strength fast. Please, just come with me to see what the Stone Pack healer has to say." Her earnestness gave me pause. Despite my personal reservations, I couldn't turn away from someone who was clearly suffering. "All right," I said after a long moment. "I'll go with you, but don't get your hopes up until we know all the details." Emma's face lit up with relief. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "Seriously, Scarlett, thank you. This means everything to me." "Text me the details," I said as I stood, grabbing my coat. "We'll leave first thing tomorrow." Emma nodded enthusiastically, already pulling out her phone to send me the information. After parting ways with Emma, I drove home in relative silence. But the moment I unlocked my front door, every muscle in my body went rigid. My living room was a disaster. Herbs were scattered across the couch, glass potion bottles were smashed on the floor, and the sharp scent of spilled oils lingered in the air. My wooden coffee table was flipped on its side, and one of my bookshelves had been rifled through, books left in disarray. I stepped inside cautiously, my emerald eyes scanning every corner of the room. Whoever had broken in had searched quickly and carelessly, but they wouldn't find anything important here. All my critical research and rare supplies were locked away securely elsewhere. I crouched down, brushing my fingers over the shards of glass on the floor. The lingering, earthy aroma told me they had spilled a bottle of wolfsbane extract. My lips curled into a cold smile. Amateur. This wasn't a random break-in. Someone was trying to send a message. I let out a low chuckle, standing up and brushing my hands off. "Pathetic," I muttered under my breath. Then I felt it, a subtle but familiar pressure against my mind. Marcus Winters Beta was trying to establish a link through the pack connection. Without hesitation, I blocked him. Seconds later, a stronger, more forceful presence smashed against my shields. Marcus himself. His alpha command radiated power, insistent and heavy like a battering ram against my mental barriers. I didn't falter. My shields held steady, and I strengthened them further, refusing him entry. The air around me grew tense as the pressure from his energy lingered, but I knew he couldn't break through. No one could force something from me I wasn't willing to give. Once the relentless battering stopped, I exhaled slowly, leaning back against the wall. My defiance would likely enrage Marcus further, but I didn't care. He'd already taken enough from me. I paced the length of my office, my hands clasped behind my back as frustration churned inside me. The dim lighting of the room cast long shadows across the polished floors, but they did little to calm my rising anger. "She's blocking me," I growled, glaring at the far wall. "Sarah, did you hear me? She's actively blocking her alpha." Sarah sat elegantly in the leather chair across from my desk, but the tightness in her posture betrayed her unease. She held a teacup in her hands, though I doubted she'd taken more than a single sip. Yes, Marcus, she said with forced calm. I understand the severity of the situation, but we knew Scarlett's attitude would be difficult to manage. I turned sharply, slamming my hands down on the desk in front of her. The sound echoed through the room like a gunshot. Difficult to manage, I demanded, my voice low and dangerous. Sarah, she's our daughter. The daughter we need to secure this political marriage, and she's slipping further from our grasp every second. Sarah flinched slightly but held her composure. If you think I haven't been trying to resolve this, you're mistaken, she snapped. Do you think I enjoy this chaos? The pack is falling apart with all the gossip surrounding Grace and Alexander. Yes, Grace, I barked, cutting her off. Do you even understand how much damage that girl has caused? She and Alexander were seen together yet again, this time at the healing den. In an intimate moment, no less. Sarah paled visibly, her fingers tightening around her teacup. That's an exaggeration, she said weakly. Alexander was only comforting her. Comforting her? I laughed bitterly. And how do you explain their repeated rendezvous becoming the talk of the entire pack? Do you think this will make Scarlett more inclined to play along with our plans? This public display of favoritism is a slap in her face. Grace is ill, Sarah defended, though her voice lacked conviction. She needs support. My instincts as a mother. She's not our daughter. The words exploded from me, silencing her abruptly. Sarah's lips pressed into a thin line, but her eyes glistened with unshed tears. I wasn't finished. No matter how much you've grown attached to Grace, she's not Scarlett. She never has been. Scarlett is the one with the ties, the connections, and the bloodline necessary to secure this alliance. We can't afford to lose her over your misplaced sentimentality. You think I don't know that? Sarah whispered, her voice breaking slightly. I softened, just barely. The anger in my chest shifted to something closer to regret. We failed her, I admitted quietly, my tone losing its sharp edge. During her childhood, we were absent when she needed us. That failure rests on both of us. Sarah's shoulders slumped, the teacup trembling slightly in her hands. This situation, I continued, straightening as I regained my resolve, is spiraling out of control, and I won't stand by while we lose everything. I'm going to her house. Sarah perked up slightly, her eyes widening. I'll come with you, she offered quickly. I shook my head curtly. No, you'll only make things worse. Her gaze sharpened. Her attitude, I interrupted, my voice cold, is the result of years of neglect and dismissal, and you didn't help matters by revoking her pack privileges. That was a petty move, Sarah. Her eyes filled with indignation, but she said nothing as I continued. Restore her access immediately, I commanded, my alpha authority wrapping around every word. Her jaw tightened, but she nodded stiffly, unable to disobey. Without another word, I turned on my heel, grabbing my coat and striding toward the door. I had a daughter to confront. One way or another, this situation had to be resolved before it tore the pack apart entirely. Chapter 11. Confronting Marcus. A sharp knock echoed through the stillness of my house. It wasn't hurried or timid. It was deliberate, authoritative. Through the frosted glass on my front door, I recognized the tall, broad-shouldered silhouette immediately. Marcus Winters, my so-called father. I glared at the door for a moment, my hand resting on the brass knob. He was likely here to lecture me, to reassert his fragile authority, or worse, defend Grace yet again. Cora growled in the back of my mind. We owe him nothing, she rumbled. Send him away, let him stew outside. But I couldn't do that, not without opening the door first, to deliver the rejection in person. Taking a breath, I swung the door open. He stood there, dressed sharply as always in dark trousers and a perfectly pressed shirt, his alpha aura rolling off him like waves. His silver-streaked hair shone under the moonlight, and his piercing gaze met mine, full of expectation. Scarlett, he said, his voice steady but carrying that forced calm he used whenever he wanted compliance. I didn't reply. Instead, I stepped aside silently. His brows furrowed slightly, not in surprise, but as if calculating why I wasn't immediately snapping. I had no intention of making this meeting comfortable for him. You're in. Don't make me regret it, I said curtly, closing the door after he stepped through. Without offering him so much as a look, I walked toward the kitchen. My pace was deliberate, unhurried, a small show of disinterest in his presence. I grabbed a glass from the cabinet and poured myself water, Not as hospitality, but to make it clear I wasn't accommodating him. The sound of water filling the glass filled the room, drowning out the slight shuffling of Marcus, shifting his weight uncomfortably. I returned to the living room, cradling my glass, and sat down in my armchair. My movements were cold and sharp, each action laced with quiet defiance. Marcus remained standing for a moment, clearly uncertain about where to position himself. He seemed to expect warmth or acknowledgement, neither of which were forthcoming. Finally, he sat stiffly on the edge of my sofa, looking out of place in the intimate, private space. "Did you and Alexander have a quarrel?" he began, his voice trying to sound conversational but laced with tension. I let the glass rest on my knee, staring at him as though he'd just asked something utterly ridiculous. For a second, I considered playing along, but sarcasm felt more appropriate. "A quarrel?" I repeated, my tone mocking. The corner of my lip twitched upward in a humorless smile. "Is that why you're here, my father? To accuse me without a shred of understanding yet again?" The words were sharp, cutting, and they landed exactly where I wanted them to, on the very guilt he tried to suppress. He stayed silent, his jaw tensing, but his eyes gave him away. He was regretting coming here. "Let me guess," I continued. "Grace's sob story reached your ears, and now you're here to ensure your precious Omega daughter doesn't feel slighted?" His expression flickered briefly, an almost imperceptible wince, a tightening of his brow. It was the smallest in his stoic facade, but I caught it. Though he quickly plastered on an unreadable mask, it didn't fool me. I knew Marcus Winters too well. I saw the regret buried in his gaze. Regret he had no right to aim at me. I leaned forward slightly, my tone chilling the room further. "Or did Luna Sarah put you up to this? Sent you to twist my arm with a lecture about duty and respect? Spare me the theatrics." "That's not what this is," he said sharply, his voice finally firm with the authority of an alpha, though I was immune to such commands. His own betrayal softened the edge in his tone. "This isn't about Grace," Marcus insisted, though his refusal to meet my eyes betrayed him. "I came here because you need something," I cut him off coldly, crossing my arms. "Because I serve a political purpose, and you can't afford for me to cut ties completely, can you?" The tension in his jaw told me I had hit a nerve. "You've changed," he said, his voice quieter now. "You weren't always this combative." My lips curved into an icy smile. "Maybe that's because I've spent years trying to earn your approval." I watched as the words landed, hitting him like a slap to the face. "You realize that severing the mate bond will affect this pack's reputation," he said finally, falling back to his tried-and-true strategy of logic and reason. "You know how fragile alliances can be without this marking ceremony, Scarlett. Have you really thought this through?" "Thought it through?" I raised an eyebrow, letting out a dry laugh. "Did you ask Alexander if he'd thought it through before he humiliated me in front of his entire pack with Grace clinging to his arm?" Marcus visibly stiffened. He opened his mouth to respond, but I held up a hand to silence him. "Did you think it through when you revoked my packhouse access the moment I dared to push back against your precious Grace?" I stood now, my voice rising. "Don't," Marcus growled, his alpha tone slipping. "No," I barked back, silencing him with a of my voice so sharp and icy that even Cora hummed with approval. "You don't get to play the wise, concerned father now. You made it clear where I stand in your priorities years ago." His fists curled, resting on his knees. The veins in his forearms bulged slightly, betraying his losing grip on his temper. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter but burning with tension. "This isn't about Grace," he said through gritted teeth. "This is about the Winters pack. Our strength. Do you know how much damage you'll do if—" This alliance was broken the moment Alexander paraded his true mate in front of me like some weak damsel in distress, I interrupted, taking a step forward. "If cutting ties with the Winters pack is what it takes to avoid betrayal and humiliation, then so be it." "Scarlett," Marcus leaped to his feet, towering over me with every ounce of alpha bravado he had. His eyes flashed with anger. But I didn't budge. "You don't scare me, Marcus," I said coldly, my emerald eyes locking onto his, "and you never will." He looked like he wanted to grab something, to break it just to regain a sense of power. His broad chest rose and fell with sharp breaths as he stared at me, searching for something, anything, that would make me bow. but there was nothing left for him to find. "You may be the alpha of the Winters pack," I said, stepping aside and strolling to the door. "But this, whatever bond you think still exists here, it ended the day Grace nearly killed me, and you sent her off to Europe instead of holding her accountable." "That's not true," he snapped, but his tone lacked conviction. "Isn't it?" I threw the door open, my hand gripping the edge tightly. He faltered, the weight of my words finally sinking into his every move. "You let her win then," I continued, "and you're letting her win now." "Stop it," he said, his voice low, though the desperation in it was unmistakable. "You think I don't see it? How every decision you've made since discovering your mistake has revolved around Grace? How easily you revoke my privileges to appease your precious fake daughter?" "Enough," he roared, his voice reverberating with his alpha command. For a moment, his aura surged, his wolf responding instinctively, but it faded as quickly as it came. I didn't flinch. Marcus's shoulders slumped, just ever so slightly. It wasn't defeat exactly, but it was the closest I'd ever seen him to it. "Scarlett," he said finally, his voice softer this time. There was almost a pleading edge to it. "You're my daughter. Think of how this will make us look as a pack." I tilted my head, scanning him with cold precision. He looked smaller somehow, like the weight of his calculated decisions was catching up to him. But I had no room for pity. "You only want me to care now because your reputation is at stake," I said, my voice steady but sharper with each word. For the first time that evening, Marcus looked like he didn't have a response. Standing tall, I nodded toward the open door. "Go back to your precious Omega daughter and alpha son-in-law to be, Marcus," I said, my tone completely devoid of emotion. "Let me worry about myself." He stared at me for a long moment, his lips parted slightly, as though he might say something else. But he didn't. Without another word, he stepped through the door. As the heavy wood clicked shut behind him, the silence that followed was deafening. Cora let out a low, satisfied growl in the back of my mind. Finally, she said, her pride thick in her tone, "No more pretending. He knows exactly where we stand." I let out a slow, steadying breath, letting the tension bleed from my limbs. "Let him know," I agreed silently. "Let them all know." Chapter 12. Run along to your mate. Scarlett's POV. My phone buzzed yet again, rattling noisily on the wooden nightstand beside me. The screen flashed Jason's name, but I didn't bother to pick it up. He wasn't worth the energy. He'd already been calling for hours, trying to worm his way past all the barriers I'd put between myself and Alexander's lot. The calls started simple. Once every hour or so, his tone progressively more urgent with each voicemail. Then Jason began cycling through different numbers, desperate and sloppy in his attempts to reach me. I leaned over, swiped the phone up, and stared at the screen as it buzzed incessantly. Cora growled low in my head, her irritation mirroring my own. "They're like fleas," she muttered darkly. "Annoying, persistent, and completely useless." I smirked at the analogy but didn't dignify the call with an answer. Without hesitation, I powered the phone off and tossed it back onto the nightstand. The room flooded with blessed silence. "They can waste their time all they want," I muttered aloud, swinging my legs into bed and settling into the soft warmth of my blankets. "I'm done playing their games." But peace was short-lived. I hadn't even closed my eyes for long when my instincts prickled, skin tightening with the unmistakable sensation of intruding energy. The air itself shifted slightly, carrying with it scents I recognized all too well. Alexander. Jason. I sat up slowly, discarding any remaining drowsiness. My senses sharpened, confirming what I already suspected. They were outside, their presence radiating smug arrogance even from here. Cora stirred, a growl rippling beneath my thoughts. "What is their problem now?" she snarled. That question hung unanswered as the first knock came, hard and demanding, against my door. I knew better than to answer. They wouldn't stop there. The next sound was an all too familiar one. Alexander's alpha power pressed viciously against the barrier I'd set around my property. His attempts to force my boundaries were unmistakable, heavy, overbearing, but his efforts were useless. I felt Cora's energy within me flicker to life, melding with my own. The alpha command rolled off me like a faint breeze, unable to penetrate the defenses we'd built. I rose calmly, my head shaking as disdain simmered under my skin. "Foolish," I muttered. Picking up my silver combat staff from its stand near the door, I twirled it once in my grip. The weapon hummed with faint energy, its silver edge gleaming under the dim light, a gift from my true family, the Thorn Pack. I opened the front door slowly, stepping out onto the porch to greet my uninvited guests with icy resolve. Jason stood a little ways back, the calculating beta already flinching at the sight of the staff in my hand. Recognition flashed across his face immediately, followed quickly by unease. He didn't dare take another step forward, but Alexander, arrogant Alexander, stood firm, his massive frame illuminated by the moonlight. His blazing amber eyes locked onto me with barely concealed fury. He appeared every inch the imposing alpha heir everyone saw him as. I wasn't impressed. "Scarlett," he growled, his voice low and commanding, though he didn't move. I responded silently by raising the silver combat staff, leveling its gleaming edge directly at his throat. My emerald eyes bored into his as the challenge spoke for itself. "That's close enough," I said finally, my voice steady but sharp. Jason shuffled nervously behind Alexander, his eyes darting back and forth between us. I could feel the wheels turning in his head, calculating how this would end. Poor, loyal Jason. It must take all his strength to follow a fool so blindly. Alexander tilted his head, his lips curling into a tight snarl as his wolf power writhed visibly beneath his skin. Mason, his wolf, was agitated, ravenous for submission. But no such thing would come. "Still want to come in, Alexander?" I mocked, spinning the staff with ease between my fingers. My movements were deliberate, calculated to provoke. "For someone who's supposed to be my future mate," he said coldly, stepping forward, "you're remarkably difficult to deal with." As he reached for the staff, I pivoted sharply, edging the silver just out of his grasp. "That's close enough," I said. He growled low, Mason practically roaring inside him now. The sound reverberated through the air like distant thunder, but I felt nothing. No fear, no submission, not even the faint ripple of intimidation. "What do you want, Alexander?" I asked coolly, circling him slightly with the staff still raised. "It's late. You can't possibly have anything important to say." He stopped short, his jaw ticking in frustration. "I'm hungry." For a long moment, I simply stared at him. My lips twitched, threatening a laugh I barely managed to suppress. Of all things, that was his excuse for showing up on my territory? Hunger? "I'm sure Grace has plenty of food for you," I said dryly, the venom in my tone unmistakable. "I imagine she caters to your every whim." "Scarlett," he snapped, his voice ripping through the night air like a whip. "That's enough." I raised an eyebrow, unimpressed by his tone. "Is it—" My eyes glinted with amusement as I tilted my head. "Imagine what your pack would think if they saw you like this. Alpha Alexander Amber, heir to the great northern pack, begging for scraps at his unwanted fiancé's doorstep." His power flared violently for a moment, the air thickening. Jason took a deliberate step back, clearly smart enough to know this wasn't going to end well regardless of the outcome. "You're being willful." Alexander growled, stalking closer again despite the staff. "We both know the engagement will go forward. It's necessary for our packs. Quit dragging this out." I couldn't hold back any longer. I laughed outright, the sound sharp and cold, ringing out through the night. "Dragging this out?" I echoed mockingly. "Shall I remind you who's been dragging things out, Alexander? You've got a pregnant mistress waiting in the sanatorium, remember?" That hit its mark. Mason surged harder beneath Alexander's skin, his frustration nearly palpable. His amber eyes darkened further, and for a moment, I thought he might snap entirely, but he didn't. He straightened himself, his power simmering just beneath the surface now. "The ceremony will happen," he announced, his alpha authority laden with finality. Too bad for him that his declarations meant nothing to me. I my head, staring at him as though he were a particularly stubborn child. "Still can't decide, can you? Torn between your promises and your true mate?" A flicker of guilt crossed his features, though he masked it quickly. But before he could issue another command or justify himself further, the bond between him and Grace pulled taut. I felt it, that sickening tether snapping taut as her fabricated pain reached him. It was like a lifeline she yanked whenever she needed his attention. Alexander stiffened immediately, his head snapping slightly to the side as the bond whispered her plea. Jason hesitated nearby, clearly debating whether to speak. Meanwhile, I just watched the scene unfold with sharp amusement. the mighty alpha-to-be, reduced to this. He couldn't even manage the chaos between his obligations and his so-called destined mate. Grace had him wrapped around her little finger, no matter how high Alexander tried to hold his head. He pulled his phone out hastily and stepped to the side, moving just beyond reach as he answered her call. I couldn't hear the exchange, but it was evident in his every movement. His face twisted with frustration and obligation, every word weighing heavier on his shoulders. Cora hummed in satisfaction. "Pathetic," she muttered darkly. I leaned casually against the porch railing, twirling the combat staff lazily between my fingers as I waited for him to finish. Jason's eyes darted nervously between us, his discomfort written all over his face. When Alexander finally turned back to face me, the tension in his features was obvious. Whatever Grace wanted from him had only added to his burdens. "She needs me," he said stiffly, though the weariness in his tone was unmistakable. "Of course she does," I replied smoothly. My voice carried unwavering calm, but the words stung with mockery. "She always needs you, doesn't she?" "Right on cue." Jason winced at the jab, but wisely remained silent. "This isn't over, Scarlett," Alexander growled, his amber eyes locked onto mine, his wolf power fighting to regain control of the situation. "Oh, but it is," I retorted, straightening as I leveled him with a glare. Raising the staff once more, I pointed it at him one last time. "Run along to your mate, Alexander. She's waiting for you." For a moment, he didn't move, his pride visibly warring with his reality, but even he couldn't deny the undeniable pull of Grace's bond. Alexander stepped out onto my balcony to answer Grace's call, his face grimacing with every moment of their exchange. Chapter 13. Painful Choices. I stood by the window, leaning slightly against the frame, and watched as Alexander spoke on the balcony. His phone was pressed to his ear, glowing faintly in the moonlight. His posture was rigid, shoulders tense, and every now and then his free hand would run through his dark hair in frustration. Grace's voice came through faintly from the other end of the call. Though I couldn't hear her words, I could guess their meaning by the way Alexander's expression constantly shifted. Anger, guilt, tenderness, and then back to guilt. It was almost like watching a puppet being pulled by invisible strings. For a brief moment, I wondered what it would feel like to care. To truly care about a man like Alexander. If I had ever loved him, maybe watching this scene would have shattered my heart. But all it did was leave me with bitter disdain. Instead, my thoughts wandered elsewhere. Unbidden. A face I had trained myself not to think of appeared in my mind, Roman. My adoptive brother from the Thorn Pack, the man who had been more than just family. I wondered if he had found his destined mate, or if, like Alexander, he'd been forced into a political marriage. I shook my head, dispelling the memories. It didn't matter anymore. Those days were long gone. The sharp ring of a phone broke through my thoughts. The sound startled me at first before I realized it was Alexander's. He had left it on the living room table when he stormed out to take Grace's call. The screen lit up with the words, "James Amber." I raised an eyebrow. The Alpha King himself, how fitting. Alexander hesitantly glanced at me from the balcony, then ended his call with Grace before stepping back into the room to answer his father. "Father," Alexander said as he lifted the phone to his ear. His tone was flat, but I saw the tension in his jaw. James's voice carried through the line, authoritative and sharp even without the speakerphone. "Alexander, we have a problem." "I'm aware," Alexander replied, immediately defensive. "Then why hasn't it been handled yet?" James's tone sharpened further. "These rumors about breaking the engagement cannot continue. The Parliament is already on edge. Have you done anything to contain this?" Alexander began, but his father's voice cut him off. "It is no excuses," James barked. "The marking ceremony must go forward as planned. This alliance is critical to our territories, and I won't allow your personal mess to derail decades of strategy." Alexander rubbed his temple, his frustration clear. "It's more complicated than that." James's laughter was cold and humorless. "It's only complicated because you've allowed it to be. Your complications don't matter. You'll proceed with the ceremony, and I expect no further delays. Do I make myself clear?" The words hung in the room like heavy chains. Alexander's hand tightened on the phone, and his voice lowered as he answered, "Yes, father." I crossed my arms, leaning against the wall as I watched him hang up. His shoulders slumped for just a second before he looked at me, his amber eyes dark and unreadable. "The marking ceremony will proceed next week," he announced. His voice carried the authority of an alpha heir, but it was hollow to me. I didn't even bother hiding my smirk. Having trouble keeping control, future alpha king? His head snapped up, and for a moment I thought he might actually lash out. But instead, he let out a low growl, his frustration radiating through the room. "You'll attend the upcoming pack gathering as my fiancé," he continued, ignoring my comment. "It's necessary to put an end to the rumors of any issues between us." I tilted my head, feigning curiosity. "Oh, issues? You sound so formal, Alexander. Why not just say, Grace? We both know she's the real problem." His expression darkened further, but he didn't bite back. Perhaps he was learning that words wouldn't work on me anymore. Instead, he stepped closer, and something in his tone shifted. "Scarlett," he said quietly, almost pleading, "I know this situation isn't fair to you, but the packs, I interrupted sharply, taking a step forward. "If you say one more word about the packs, I swear, I'll throw you out myself. Or should I mention the pack's wonderful support of your delicate Grace parading her condition in front of me?" "She's ill," Alexander said defensively, his voice rising. "And whose fault is that?" I snapped back. My emerald eyes locked onto his, Cora's power making my tone sharper than any dagger. "You knew what you were doing. You're willing to humiliate me in front of your entire pack to protect her, and now you expect me to stand by and smile?" "Scarlett, please," he breathed, his tone softening again. He took another step forward, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him. "I made a mistake. The marking ceremony will fix everything." He reached out, his hand hovering near mine, but I slapped it away. The sound was sharp, breaking the tension-filled air. "Don't touch me," I growled. "Do you think I'm just another wolf to be commanded? Another pawn in this disgusting game?" His lips pressed into a thin line, and his shoulders tightened, but he didn't try to touch me again. "This alliance means more than just us," he said, his voice low and heavy. "And my dignity means nothing?" I spat. "You can't even keep your mate bond in check, Alexander. Everyone knows Grace has you wrapped around her finger. You're a disgrace to your title." His amber eyes flared, catching the light like embers about to ignite. For a moment, raw anger surged between us. I could feel Mason, his wolf, pushing against him, desperate to assert dominance. But Alexander held himself back. "You don't understand," he said finally, his tone bitter. "No, I think I understand perfectly," I replied coldly. "You want to have it all, to serve your pack, your father, your mistress, and still expect me to stand here and take this humiliation like a silent doll." I took a step closer, our faces just inches apart now. "Here's the truth, Alexander. I don't care about your struggle. I don't care about the packs. I don't care about your excuses. You lost the right to my respect the moment you chose her over me." He flinched at my words, his jaw tightening as though he wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. For a moment, we stood there in tense silence, the air heavy with unspoken truths. Finally, he turned on his heel and stormed toward the door. Each step echoed in my house, a reminder of the chaos he'd brought with him. As the door slammed shut behind him, I let out a long breath. My hands were shaking slightly, though whether it was from anger or exhaustion, I couldn't tell. Cora hummed softly in my mind, satisfied with the confrontation. "He's pathetic," she said simply. "A weak wolf hiding behind a strong title." I moved quickly, grabbing the cleaning supplies from under my sink. His scent lingered in the air. A nauseating mix of smoke and Grace's cloying perfume. It filled every corner of my space, suffocating me. I sprayed the counters with bleach, scrubbing harder than necessary. The sound of scrubbing filled the room, drowning out the lingering echoes of Alexander's voice. "You're disgusting," I muttered aloud, imagining his face with every swipe. "You and your entire pack." Chapter 14. Taste of Her Own Medicine. The night air felt suffocating as I sped away from Scarlett's territory. Her words still burned in my mind, each syllable laced with venom and truth I couldn't deny. My phone buzzed urgently. Jason's panic flooded through our pack link before I could even answer. "Alpha? Grace, she's..." Jason's mental voice cracked with urgency. "The healing den. You need to come now." My heart stopped for a moment. Mason, my wolf, surged with protective rage beneath my skin. I gunned the engine, tires screaming against asphalt as I raced toward the pack's healing den. The usual 15-minute drive took barely 5. The scene that greeted me sent ice through my veins. Luna Sarah was crumpled outside the sacred healing chamber, her usual composed demeanor shattered. Tears streamed down her face as she rocked back and forth. "Sarah?" I approached cautiously, my voice tight with concern. She looked up at me, her eyes wild with anguish. "Alexander, oh goddess, Grace." Her words dissolved into fresh sobs. Daniel Winter stepped forward from the shadows, his face grave. "The healers discovered something disturbing," he said quietly. "The silver poisoning. It spread beyond her bloodstream." My fists clenched involuntarily. "What does that mean?" "It's affecting her ability to shift," Daniel continued, his voice dropping lower. "And worse, it's threatening her life force." Sarah's mental projections of pain intensified, nearly bringing me to my knees. "My baby," she whimpered. "Her wolf form, it's being corrupted. The healers say she might be permanently trapped in human form." Mason roared inside me, the sound echoing through my mind like thunder. Without thinking, I grabbed the nearest healer by his collar, lifting him clear off the ground. "If anything happens to her," I growled, my eyes blazing amber, "your entire bloodline will answer to the Northern Territories." The healer's face went pale. "Alpha Alexander, please," he stammered. "We're doing everything possible." From the corner of my eye, I caught sight of Hazel, Scarlett's friend, standing among the gathered healers. Her expression was carefully neutral, but I could see the contempt lurking in her eyes. The sight of her brought an unwelcome reminder. Scarlett, the marking ceremony, my obligations. A pained whimper echoed from behind the healing chamber doors. Grace's voice weak and frightened. Everything else vanished from my mind. I released the healer, who scrambled away quickly. "What treatments are you trying?" I demanded. Another healer stepped forward, clutching a chart. "We've administered traditional silver antidotes, but they're not working as expected. The poison seems different somehow." Mason's protective instincts surged stronger. "Different how?" "It's almost as if." The healer hesitated, glancing nervously at Sarah, "as if it's been engineered specifically to target her wolf." Sarah's sobbing intensified. "This is my fault," she cried. "I should have noticed sooner." I placed a hand on her shoulder, trying to project calm I didn't feel. "We'll fix this," I promised, though the words felt hollow. Through the healing chamber's window, I could see Grace lying motionless on the bed. Her usual ethereal beauty was marred by pain. Her platinum blonde hair spread across the pillow like a broken halo. Hours passed in a blur of tension and fear. Healers rushed in and out, carrying various herbs and potions. Each time the door opened, Grace's whimpers of pain stabbed through me like physical wounds. I paced the corridor restlessly, my alpha power crackling dangerously around me. Junior pack members scurried out of my way, their fear evident. Only Hazel remained unmoved by my display. She stood quietly in her corner, observing everything with those sharp, judging eyes. "You should rest, Alpha," she finally said, her tone professionally detached. "The marking ceremony is less than a week away. You'll need your strength." The reminder felt like a slap. I turned to face her fully, seeing Scarlett's influence in her steady gaze. "The ceremony isn't important right now," I snapped. Hazel's eyebrow raised slightly. "No, the Northern Territories might disagree." Before I could respond, another cry from Grace pierced the air. I was at the chamber door instantly, my hand on the handle. "Alpha Alexander," Hazel's voice carried to me, soft but clear. "Remember what happened 3 years ago?" I froze, my grip tightening on the door handle. The memory she referenced, the rogue attack on Scarlett, flashed through my mind. But Grace's next whimper of pain drowned out everything else. I pushed through the door, leaving Hazel and her knowing looks behind. Grace needed me. Nothing else mattered. The head healer looked up as I entered, his face drawn with exhaustion. "Alpha, we're trying a new combination of herbs, but—" "Save her," I commanded, my voice carrying every ounce of alpha authority I possessed. "Whatever it takes." Grace's eyes fluttered open at my voice. "Alexander?" she whispered, reaching for me weakly. I took her hand, ignoring the way Mason bristled at the contact. The silver poisoning had left her skin burning hot. "I'm here," I assured her, pushing aside thoughts of Scarlett, the ceremony, and everything else. Sarah slipped into the room behind me. Her tears finally subsided into quiet sniffles. "The other healers say we should prepare for the worst," she said softly. "No," I growled, my grip tightening on Grace's hand. "That's not an option." Outside the chamber, I could hear the whispers of gathering pack members. Their concern, their questions, their judgments. But none of it mattered. Not when Grace lay here, fighting for her life. Not when the silver poison threatened to destroy her very essence. The moon climbed higher in the sky as I maintained my vigil. Somewhere across the territory, Scarlett was probably awake, her emerald eyes blazing with justified anger. But here, in this sterile room that reeked of herbs and fear, I couldn't bring myself to care about the consequences of my choice. The sharp ring of my phone cut through my dreams, dragging me back to consciousness. I grabbed it without opening my eyes, ready to silence whoever dared disturb my sleep. "Scarlett." Hazel's voice calm but urgent. "We need to talk." I sat up, suddenly alert. Hazel never called without good reason. "What happened?" I asked, though part of me already knew. "Grace's condition has taken a turn," Hazel said carefully. "The silver poisoning is worse than anyone realized." I leaned back against my headboard, not bothering to hide my lack of sympathy. "And?" "Alexander nearly assaulted one of the healers," Hazel continued. "He's quite protective of her." "How shocking," I drawled sarcastically. "The marking ceremony is less than a week away, and he's at her bedside?" "Can you really walk away from this alliance, Scarlett?" Hazel asked quietly. "The political implications." "Watch me," I cut her off coldly. "I'm done being their puppet." Hazel was quiet for a moment before speaking again. "The silver poison is spreading through her entire system," she said clinically. "It's corrupting her wolf form. She might never be able to shift again." I couldn't help the dark laugh that escaped me. "Karma's finally catching up to her, isn't it?" "Scarlett." Hazel's tone held a warning. "Don't," I snapped. "You remember what she did to me 3 years ago. Those rogues nearly killed me." "I remember," Hazel said softly. "That's why I'm not involved in her treatment." I closed my eyes, letting the bitter satisfaction wash over me. Grace was finally getting a taste of her own medicine. Chapter 15. Family Politics and Manipulations. Morning light spilled into my kitchen through the half-open curtains. I let the warmth soak into me as I sipped black coffee and stared at my phone. My shoulders relaxed for the first time in what felt like days. But, of course, peace never lasted. Buzz. I glanced at the screen. Hazel's name popped up in my notifications. Her text was short and to the point, as always. "Heading to Europe for an international werewolf medical conference. Have to catch the flight soon. We'll update you if I find anything useful." I nodded to myself, setting the phone back down. Hazel was a constant reminder that some wolves still maintained quiet integrity. The world could use more like her. Before I could formulate a reply, that familiar tug of Emma's presence brushed against my mind like a persistent knock. "Scarlett, you won't believe what I just heard." Emma's voice sounded excited, almost too excited for this early in the day. I sighed, already knowing where this was heading. I let the connection deepen, pulling her into focus. "Let me guess. More Grace drama?" There was a beat of silence before Emma's surprise lit up the link. "How did you know?" "It doesn't take a genius, Emma. Grace's name comes with constant chaos." "What is it this time?" I asked dryly, leaning back against the kitchen counter. "Hazel told me last night." I continued before Emma could rattle off half-baked gossip. "Her condition's getting worse, really worse." Emma's curiosity surged in the link, sharper and more alert now. "How bad?" I clicked my tongue as I recalled Hazel's summary. "The silver poisoning, it's spreading, not just through her body but deeper. It's attacking her wolf. There's a chance she could get stuck in human form." The silence on Emma's end stretched longer this time. Then came her mental gasp. "That's Moon Goddess, Scarlett, that's awful. Even for her." "Is it?" I shot back, letting my wolf Cora swell behind the thought. Both Emma and I knew the answer. I didn't need to elaborate. Karmic justice has a strange way of balancing things out, don't you think? Emma hesitated, her tone conflicted. "You're not wrong, but stuck in human form, that's a curse worse than death for some wolves." I couldn't muster any sympathy. The harsh memory of rogue claws slashing across my side and the nights I'd spent trapped in bed flooded back like bitter venom. "She orchestrated that attack," I reminded Emma coldly. 3 years ago. She almost killed me. She let rogues put me through hell and then paraded around like a saint while I was recovering. Emma's silence shifted. Now it carried understanding, agreement. But then her tone grew serious again. This changes everything, Scarlett. You know what this means, don't you? Let me guess, I said dryly. The Northern Council will pressure Alexander and me to speed things up. Emma sighed deeply into the link. Exactly. Grace is losing credibility by the second. She can't be his Luna if she can't even shift. All eyes will turn to you to stabilize things. Stabilize things? I repeated mockingly. I'm nothing but a political pawn in their eyes. They think controlling me will fix this mess. They're in for a surprise. Still, Emma prodded, her maternal instinct shining through as always. Be careful, Scarlett. The council plays dirty when they need to. Just watch your back. I always do, I said simply, and with that, I severed the link, returning to my morning coffee. But my peace was short-lived. Another presence, stronger and more refined, fluttered against my mind. The energy was polite yet persistent, like a hand knocking on an already open door. Victoria Amber. I braced myself for what was sure to be an exhausting mental encounter. Gritting my teeth, I reluctantly let her voice through. My dear Scarlett, Victoria began, her tone smooth as silk, oozing warmth that felt anything but genuine. I hope I'm not interrupting your morning. Not at all, Luna Victoria, I said flatly, steering clear of any warmth in my tone. Her words carried the elegance of a Luna who had mastered manipulation over decades. I wasn't about to play her game. Wonderful, she purred. I was hoping you'd join me for lunch at the Amber Mansion today. I thought it would be lovely to catch up. I could prepare some of your favorite dishes. Remember those wolf delicacies you enjoyed when you first joined us? It was a nice touch, the careful play on nostalgia. Victoria knew how to press just the right buttons. Too bad they didn't work on me anymore. Thank you for the invitation, I replied carefully. But I have obligations at the healing center today. There, polite, formal, unyielding. The subtle pause before her next words told me she wasn't pleased. Oh, Scarlett. Surely you can take a small break to join me? Her voice shifted slightly, carrying a note of concern now, especially with Grace's condition being so critical. The poor thing barely made it through the night. Right on cue. Emotional manipulation twisted into a perfect weapon. I'll think about it, I said, though Cora growled her disapproval in the back of my mind. Please do, dear, Victoria pressed. After all, it's been some time since we shared a proper conversation. Noon would be perfect. I felt Emma lingering at the edge of my mind link, eavesdropping silently. Face this head on, she encouraged firmly. Better to stop her games before they start. Cora sighed in exasperation. Fine, if they want to play, so will we. I'll be there at noon, I finally agreed, though I could feel my wolf sharpening her claws in annoyance. Wonderful. Victoria's satisfaction spilled through the link. I'm looking forward to it, my dear. The moment her presence withdrew, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Alexander. I frowned, remembering I'd unblocked his number to avoid the constant barrage of calls through our psychic link. His name flashed on the screen like an unwanted reminder of everything I wanted to avoid. Reluctantly, I answered. What now? I asked sharply. His voice came through heavy with exhaustion. You said you'd join my mother for lunch. And? I shot back, already annoyed by his weariness. No doubt he'd spent the night glued to Grace's bedside, wringing his hands while playing her protector. I'll pick you up at 11:30, he said firmly. No, I replied immediately, my tone leaving no room for argument. I don't need a chauffeur. I'm perfectly capable of driving myself. Scarlett, his voice hardened, the edge of his alpha authority creeping in. You will let me? I will do no such thing, I interrupted coldly. I said I'll be there. That should be enough. Why do you always have to make things so difficult? He snarled, his frustration leaking through the speaker. Why do you always have to control everything? I countered without missing a beat. The line went quiet for a moment. I could almost see him pacing wherever he was, running his hand through his hair as he tried to suppress Mason, his wolf. This isn't a request, he said finally, his tone low and warning. And yet, I paused for effect, my voice dripping with mock politeness. It sounds like you're begging. The silence that followed was deafening. Then he exhaled sharply, an audible sign of retreat. Fine. Noon. Glad we understand each other, I said with a smirk, and I promptly hung up before he could argue further. I set the phone down, my hand lingering on it for a moment. The day had barely begun, and the games were already in full swing. Cora's voice hummed in my mind, filled with disdain. They're clinging to scraps of control. Let them watch as it all crumbles. A part of me agreed. Another part wanted to burn it all down before they could try to salvage anything. Chapter 16, she looked like a Luna. I stood at Scarlett's border, my jaw tight and my patience slipping fast. For an hour I had been trying to reach her. The link through our minds was cold and empty. Jason had tried too, his tone apologetic when his efforts failed. She's completely blocked us out, Alpha. His voice echoed past my frustration. I've even tried her personal number. I knew that already. Jason had repeated it 5 times like it would change something. My hands fisted at my sides as I resisted the urge to lash out. Mason, my wolf, bristled beneath my skin. He hated being ignored, and so did I. She's probably already on her way to the mansion without you, Jason offered tentatively, like he didn't believe it himself, but wanted to calm my spiraling frustration. I growled, not interested in guessing games. Part of me wanted to storm across Scarlett's borders, break her damn shields, and force her to listen. She didn't block me before, not like this. Jason shifted on his feet, uneasy at my lack of response. Maybe you should contact Luna Victoria? A sharp breath left me. I hated feeling cornered, hated knowing Jason was right even more. My mother would know where Scarlett was. She always did. With reluctance curling in my stomach, I reached out through the pack link. Mother! My voice was harder than I meant. Anger bled into my tone immediately. Victoria responded quickly, her presence sharp, commanding, and impatient. Yes, Alexander? I didn't waste time. Has Scarlett left for the mansion? She has, Victoria answered smoothly, as if my question annoyed her. You should be here already, waiting for her, not throwing tantrums outside her borders. I bit back an angry retort. Scarlett's been uncooperative lately. Uncooperative? Victoria interrupted, her tone chilling. You call her independence uncooperative? Perhaps you've forgotten she has no reason to answer to you anymore, not after your antics with Grace. Grace isn't part of this, I snapped before I could stop myself. Victoria was quick, precise, and sharp as always. Do not lie to me, Alexander. You've spent every night beside your precious Grace, leaving Scarlett to be humiliated in front of the council. You didn't even deny the rumors at the pack courts last week, did you? This alliance is more complicated. It's complicated because you made it complicated, Victoria hissed. Her voice carried the weight of years of experience as Luna. Fix it. Apologize to Scarlett properly. Sever your ties with Grace formally, for good. Mason growled in protest, but Victoria pressed harder, refusing to let me speak. The Northern Territory Council is watching closely, she continued, her tone dripping with authority. Your position as heir is slipping, Alexander. There was no bluff in her words. She had always been blunt with me, especially when it came to decisions about the pack. Victoria didn't stop there. Scarlett is the council's favored candidate for Luna, and you know why. That emerald-eyed wolf of hers is rare, powerful, and a symbol of unity. You are being judged, and you're failing. Her words hit like a blow straight to the gut. My fists clenched until my nails bit into my skin. My wolf Mason paced wildly inside me. Do not make me interfere more directly, she added with a finality I couldn't argue with. She severed the link without waiting for my response. I let out a rough breath and headed for my car. Anger burned under my skin as I drove toward the Amber Mansion, the weight of my mother's words heavy on my shoulders. By the time I arrived, the tension in me had festered into something nearly unbearable. The ancestral mansion loomed ahead, grand and unyielding as always. Its tall pillars and sprawling walls stood as a reminder of the Amber Pack's long history. For generations, this place had witnessed the rise of leaders, but today it felt more like a trap. The moment I stepped inside, I heard the sound of voices. My mother's warm yet commanding tone, followed by Scarlett's quieter response. I walked toward the main hall, and the sight stopped me cold. At the top of the grand staircase stood Victoria, practically glowing with satisfaction. Beside her was Scarlett, her emerald eyes striking even from a distance, her posture firm and unbothered. But what caught my attention was the choker around her neck. Silver-infused diamonds gleamed in the light, and the moonstone centerpiece seemed alive against Scarlett's skin. It was an ancient symbol, a ceremonial piece meant only for the future Luna of the Amber Pack. "It suits you perfectly," Victoria said, straightening the choker around Scarlett's neck with the care of a mother doting on her daughter. "As if it were always meant for you." Scarlett didn't respond right away, though I could tell by the slight tension in her shoulders that she wasn't completely comfortable. "Luna Victoria," she said after a moment, her voice respectful but cold. "This is unnecessary, truly." "Nonsense," Victoria replied smoothly, dismissing Scarlett's resistance entirely. "You are to be the next Luna. This is your rightful place." I swallowed hard, my jaw locking as I watched them descend the staircase. Victoria had threaded her arm through Scarlett's, a calculated move to present unity and grace. Mason stirred violently within me at the sight of Scarlett like that. There was something primal about the way the choker rested against her throat, a possessive instinct that I couldn't shake. But then Grace's face flashed in my mind, weak, her body racked with silver poisoning. The guilt hit me as hard as the instinct to claim Scarlett had. As they reached the main hall, both women turned toward me. Scarlett's gaze locked onto mine in seconds, sharp and unyielding. Her emerald eyes glinted dangerously, and for a fleeting moment I saw her wolf Cora rise beneath her skin, meeting Mason's energy head-on. The room crackled with tension. Victoria's sharp voice broke through before either of us could speak. "Alexander, how wonderful of you to finally join us." Her tone was polite, but the dig was deliberate. Everything was deliberate with Victoria. Her grip on Scarlett's arm tightened, her smile widening as if to taunt me. "Do you approve of the choker?" she asked, tilting her head toward the ceremonial necklace. "It's the perfect symbol for our future Luna, don't you think?" Despite myself, I couldn't tear my eyes away from the choker. The moonstone faintly reflected the light, and Scarlett's skin was framed perfectly by the ancient design. Mason growled low in my mind. It felt right seeing Scarlett like this, like a Luna. But Grace's faint cries filled my ears again. Guilt twisted in my stomach like a knife. Scarlett's lip curled into the faintest smirk, her eyes sparking with something dangerously close to mockery. She could feel my conflict, I was sure of it. Victoria, of course, noticed it too. Her eyes glinted sharply as she tightened her grip on Scarlett's arm. She had orchestrated this moment. Everything about it was a calculated move designed to force my hand. But I couldn't react, not when the weight of guilt and responsibility chained me so tightly. "The council will be pleased," Victoria said with a pointed smile. "They've been asking about the marking ceremony preparations. Isn't that right, Alexander?" Scarlett's smirk vanished at the mention of the ceremony. Her expression hardened into one of cold defiance, though she remained silent. I clenched my fists until my nails bit into my palms. The intensity in Scarlett's gaze, the heavy weight of Victoria's manipulations, and the shadow of Grace's lingering pain crashed over me like a tidal wave. I was drowning, trapped between the weight of tradition, guilt, and the undeniable pull Scarlett seemed to have on me. Mason growled, restless and unsettled by the quiet tension in the room. My mother's calculated maneuvering hadn't escaped me, but for once, I felt powerless to undo the mess surrounding me. "Mother," I said finally, my voice lower than I intended. "A word?" Victoria's smile only widened. "Of course," she said smoothly. Right after Scarlett and I finished discussing the traditional Luna ceremonies. Her meaning was clear. Scarlett was her priority now. I was only the means to an end. I watched them walk toward the private dining area, Scarlett's steps measured and her aura unreadable, even as the ceremonial choker glinted around her neck. My breath felt heavier and my steps faltered for a moment. Tradition, expectations, grace, Scarlett, they all swirled relentlessly in my mind, threatening to consume me whole. As jealousy clawed at me, guilt gnawed deeper, and frustration mounted, all I could do was watch. Watch as Scarlett grew farther and farther away from my reach, even while standing in the same room. Despite my loyalty to Grace, despite my tangled loyalties and feelings, I couldn't deny one thing. Scarlett wore the choker like she was born for it. Cora pulsed beneath her calm surface, radiating strength in a way the council would recognize instantly. She looked powerful. She looked untouchable. She looked like a Luna. And for just a moment, I hated how right it felt seeing her like that. Chapter 17, Her Own Choice. The ceremonial choker around Scarlett's neck caught the sunlight again, the silver and moonstone gleaming as she turned toward the terrace doors. Something inside me recoiled and surged at the same time. Mason stirred deep within, and I could feel the pull between duty and instinct clawing at me from both sides. Mason growled low, his irritation matching my own. "It belongs on her," he snarled. I ignored him, even as his possessiveness seeped deeper into my thoughts. My eyes flickered to Scarlett again, the choker hugging her throat like it was forged for her alone. She wore it as though it were armor, not as a symbol of submission. That's what made it unsettling. I could feel Mother's sharp gaze on me, cutting through the fog of my thoughts. I looked away from Scarlett just in time to see her lips press into a thin line. "Scarlett," Mother said sweetly, but her tone was steely underneath. "Do enjoy the garden terrace for a while. I'd like to speak with Alexander in private." Scarlett's emerald eyes flashed briefly as if she already knew what was coming. Without a word, she turned and left. She didn't glance back, didn't grace me with even a flicker of acknowledgement. The soft click of the terrace doors closing was barely audible before Mother's vice grip clamped around my arm. Her nails dug into my skin as she yanked me toward Father's study. The moment the door closed behind us, she rounded on me, her usual composed expression shattered by fury. "Have you completely lost your mind?" Her voice was sharper than I'd heard in years, cutting through the suffocating air between us. "What now?" I bit back, though my voice was far less firm than hers. I knew where this was going. Mother's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Do not take that tone with me, Alexander. I saw it, how you looked at the choker, and don't you dare tell me you weren't picturing it on that omega." I opened my mouth to protest, but Mason bristled inside me, the guilt swelling between us. "She's not just some omega," I growled, though the words felt weak even as I said them. "Not just some omega?" Mother's sharp laugh filled the room, cold and cutting. "Then what would you call her? Because I certainly wouldn't call her a Luna." Her words hit like shards of silver, and I clenched my fists at my sides. "Grace is my mate," I said stiffly. "You can't erase that bond, no matter how hard you try." Mother's laughter stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was heavier than her words. She took a step closer, her eyes boring into mine with icy resolve. "A true mate who can't shift," she bit out, her voice trembling with restrained fury. "A Luna whose wolf is poisoned and dying. Do you think the council will stand for this weakness? They've already made their stance clear. Scarlett is the one they want. Scarlett is the one they respect." I said nothing, teeth grinding as her words echoed too close to the truth I was trying to avoid. Mother began to pace, her sharp heels striking the floor with rhythmic authority. "Do you have any idea what I've done to secure this alliance?" she demanded. Her voice rose with every word. "The negotiations, the concessions, the promises? You complain about your responsibilities, but you have no idea what true leadership requires." "I know my responsibilities," I shot back, my voice rising now to match hers. "But you've never cared about Grace. You see Scarlett as a prize, a perfect Luna to parade in front of the council. This isn't about what's right, it's about politics." "And why shouldn't it be?" Mother snapped, stopping mid-step to glare at me. "The Northern Territories don't care about your personal feelings, Alexander. They care about strength, unity, legacy. Do you think they'll accept a Luna who's too weak to shift? A mate bond doesn't matter if it weakens the entire pack." Mason growled again, his frustration mirroring mine. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, the familiar pull of guilt and frustration twisting tighter around my throat. Mother's voice softened slightly but carried no less authority. "This isn't about you. It's not even about Scarlett. It's about our pack, our bloodline. You are the future Alpha King. For once, act like it." Her words cut deeper than I wanted to admit. The weight of them pressed heavily on my shoulders, suffocating me as I struggled for a response. We stood in tense silence for what felt like an eternity. Finally, she let out a sharp breath and straightened her posture. "Now, we're finished here, and you are going to fix this." Without waiting for a reply, Mother swept past me, her sharp movements punctuating her anger. I followed her out of the study, my jaw clenched so tightly it burned. When we returned to the terrace, Scarlett was lounging casually on one of the outdoor chairs. Her posture was relaxed, but her every move seemed calculated to defy the weight of tradition pressing down on me. She was examining a small bundle of herbs, turning them in her hands with the same focus she'd given those healing potions at her center. The sight of her deliberate disinterest sent a flare of irritation through me, and Mason. "What proper Luna behaves this way?" Mason growled. "Scarlett," Mother began, her tone tight but composed. "Might I suggest joining us instead of fiddling with those plants?" Scarlett didn't even look up. "These plants, Luna Victoria, are essential for the treatment of wolf form corruption." Her voice was as smooth as ever, light and indifferent, but each word carried a subtle edge. I stepped forward, ready to reprimand her, but before I could speak, a sudden jolt ripped through my mind. It was abrupt and invasive, forcing its way past my mental defenses. "Alexander!" Sarah Winters' voice flooded my head, trembling with desperation. "Please, we need your help." I froze, ignoring Mother's sharp glance as I turned slightly away. "Sarah?" I answered, my voice low but firm. "What's going on?" "It's Hazel," Sarah choked out. Her fear was palpable through the link. "She's gone, left for Europe without warning." I stiffened. Hazel? Hazel had left? Of all the healers who could leave, it had to be her, the only one skilled enough to treat Grace's condition. "What do you mean she's gone?" I growled, though I could feel the answer already forming in Sarah's thoughts. "She accepted an invitation to a medical conference overseas," Sarah said quickly, her voice breaking. "She didn't even notify us in advance. Alexander, without her, we don't stand a chance. The poison is spreading. It's overwhelming Grace's system." My stomach dropped. Mason's protective instincts surged violently, his rage barely contained. "And that's not all," Sarah continued, guilt and despair creeping into her tone. "The silver is corrupting her wolf at a faster rate now. If we don't find a solution soon, Grace may never shift again." The link shattered as Sarah's anguish overwhelmed her. My fists clenched so tightly my nails bit into my palms. The cold realization of what she'd said hit me like a blow to the chest. Hazel wasn't just any healer. She wasn't replaceable. But more than that, Hazel was Scarlett's ally. I turned on my heel, stalking back toward Scarlett with tension radiating from every step. Mother started to say something, but I silenced her with a wave of my hand. My attention was focused solely on Scarlett now. "What did you do?" I demanded, my voice low and sharp. Scarlett finally looked up, her emerald eyes meeting mine with calculated calm. "Do what?" she asked lightly, as though entirely unaware of the storm brewing around her. "Don't play games," I snapped, stepping closer. "Did you convince Hazel to abandon Grace's treatment?" Her expression didn't falter, not even for a moment. Instead, her lips curved into the slightest smirk. "Hazel made her own choices," she said smoothly, setting the herbs down on the chair next to her. "If she decided to attend an important medical conference, who am I to stop her?" Chapter 18. Accusations and Consequences. Alexander's POV. I found Scarlett standing on the mansion's terrace, her back turned, framed by the sunlight. The ceremonial choker glinted at her throat, a cruel reminder of the crumbling situation. As I approached, my anger boiled over. Every step I took drew Mason closer to the surface. Her immunity to me was infuriating enough, but now Hazel's sudden departure hung over everything like a curse. "Did you orchestrate Hazel's sudden departure?" I demanded. My voice was low, sharp, and filled with barely contained rage. Scarlett paused for barely a moment, her posture loose and unbothered. Slowly she turned, her emerald eyes gleaming with amusement. The sight sent heat racing through my chest. Her lips curled into a mocking smile. "You're worried about your precious Grace now? Is that it?" I clenched my fists, willing Mason to stay in check. "Answer the question, Scarlett." She lifted a single auburn brow, feigning surprise. "Oh, was that supposed to be a question?" It sounded more like a hollow command to me. Her sarcasm sliced through the warm air. "Did you? Interesting, isn't it?" She cut me off smoothly. Her voice was calm, every word a deliberate taunt. Grace's mysterious illness suddenly worsening at the most inconvenient time? It's almost poetic when you think about it. My blood burned hotter. "This isn't a joke, Scarlett." "Isn't it?" Her expression hardened, though her mocking tone remained. A frail Luna to be conveniently falling apart just when whatever farce you're trying to paint becomes untenable? The universe has a strange sense of humor, doesn't it? Mason growled deep in my mind, the sound thunderous and demanding. "Enough." My tone warned her to back down. she laughed, a cold, sharp sound that echoed off the stone walls of the terrace. Enough? It's barely begun, Alexander. You've spent months letting her string you along, and now you want to blame me for your failure? Hazel leaving before Grace's condition reached critical isn't a coincidence, I snapped, taking a step closer. Mason was pushing against me, his frustration threatening to spill over. Recall her. Now. Scarlett tilted her head, and those emerald eyes of hers narrowed in challenge. Or what? My breath hitched as her question hung in the air. I took another step forward. You don't understand what's at stake, Scarlett. You mean the pack, she shot back immediately, her voice laced with venom. The council? The alliances? The politics? How could I forget? It's always about them, never about the people. You're sabotaging her treatment, I said through clenched teeth. If the council finds out, they'll punish me? Scarlett interrupted, her voice dripping with disdain. Those emerald eyes gleamed as she stepped toward me, not away. What will they do, Alexander? Take away my title as your useful stand-in, Luna? She laughed. You don't frighten me, neither do they. Mason snarled furiously in my mind. The marking ceremony will not proceed until Grace fully recovers, I said, my tone a deliberate warning. Mason rose to the edge of my being, daring her to defy me further. Scarlett's lips twitched, her expression darkening into cold amusement. Is that a threat, or another empty promise? Because if it's the former... She crossed her arms, her posture every bit as defiant as her words. Her voice was a dagger, aimed straight for my pride. Grace might not live long enough to see the consequences of my actions. The bitterness of her mockery hit me like a blow. My patience snapped. Mason surged forward without hesitation, and I advanced on her, the growl in my chest escaping without restraint. Before I could move another step, a commanding voice cut through the tension. Alexander! I froze mid-step, my head snapping toward the doorway. Mother stood there, her sharp gaze narrowing further as she absorbed the scene before her. What is the meaning of this? She demanded, her voice cold and precise. Her fury pressed against my alpha instincts, forcing me to still. She stormed onto the terrace, her presence suffocating and absolute. Scarlett, unaffected by the tension around us, turned to look at Victoria with a detached expression. Luna Victoria, I trust you've been enjoying the view from up there? Before Mother could respond, I released a sharp, audible growl. Her arrival did little to douse the fire consuming Mason and me. Without another word, I stormed past Mother, my boots echoing on the terrace floors. I felt her probing presence through our pack bond. The sting of her disappointment was almost palpable. Behind me, something metallic clinked softly. I turned slightly just in time to see Scarlett removing the ceremonial choker, the moonstone centerpiece glinting faintly as she set it on the marble table. What are you doing? Mother snapped, her voice teetering between disbelief and fury. Scarlett met her gaze without flinching. My apologies, Luna Victoria, she began, her tone calm but laced with finality. But I cannot accept this symbol, not while your son's loyalties remain so. She trailed off deliberately, her smile thin. Divided. Divided? The single word stung through the pack link. You'd best explain yourself, Scarlett. Scarlett didn't hesitate. Her voice was steady, each sentence measured like a blade meant to Perhaps Alexander can explain it better himself. Ask him about his frequent visits to Grace over the past months. Mother blinked, stunned into silence. Scarlett stepped closer, her emerald eyes unflinching under Victoria's growing glare. There's a particularly interesting incident from last moon cycle, Scarlett continued smoothly. An important pack ceremony. Do you recall it, Luna? Because Alexander certainly does. He left halfway through to be by Grace's side. The air around us tightened, and for once, I didn't need to feel through the bond to know what my mother was thinking. Her shock rippled through the pack link like a charged wave. Glowering at the terrace floor, I stormed into the mansion before this argument devolved further. As I disappeared into the shadows of the study corridor, I could still feel Scarlett behind me. Her words dug deeper than I wanted to admit. In my private space, I slumped against the desk, my breath heavy with pent-up emotion. You chose this, Mason rumbled lowly. His growl, cut into every fragment of guilt, knotted within me. Shoving his voice out, I stared blankly at the wall. Behind the thick wood of my doors, muffled voices rose in intensity. Mother was confronting Scarlett, no doubt demanding every detail about what she had revealed. I didn't need the pack link to feel my mother's growing rage. Soon it would all fall on me. Mother would seek me out too. Memories of slipping past pack gatherings to rush to Grace's side came back to haunt me. That night, Grace's mental call had been fragile and terrifying. How could I have ignored her cries? And yet, here I was, every action only serving to deepen the chasm between my obligations, my family, and the woman who could be this pack's strongest Luna. Mason growled again, pacing ferociously under my skin. You've let everything spin out of control. Lifting a hand, I pressed it hard against my temples, breathing through the weight of it all. For now, I'd bought enough time to sit in silence, but that silence was suffocating, and Scarlett's words refused to leave my mind. Like everything else I'd done recently, it was never enough, and for the first time, I realized nobody was going to fix this but me. Yet, for all my titles and strength, I hadn't the slightest idea how to even begin. Chapter 19, Sever the Bond. Scarlett's POV. Victoria followed me onto the terrace. I could feel the force of her presence before she spoke, a charged energy in the air. She wasn't just angry, she was desperate. It was rare to see her lose composure, but today her calm demeanor cracked. "Scarlett," she called out, her voice smooth but strained. I turned slowly, crossing my arms in front of me as I leaned against the marble railing. She approached, her strides long and calculated as always, but her eyes gave her away. They weren't cool and composed, not this time. "You need to reconsider this decision," she said firmly. Her words carried authority, but there was a tremor beneath them. She was grasping for control. I raised an eyebrow. "Reconsider what, Victoria?" She stopped a few feet away, her sharp gaze fixed on me. "Breaking the bond. You know what this means. You won't just be hurting Alexander, you'll be destabilizing everything we've worked for. The alliances, the peace among the packs, everything hangs by a thread." I let out a short laugh, shaking my head before meeting her gaze. "Everything you've worked for, you mean? Not me. Did you expect me to sacrifice my dignity for your son? After everything he's done?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "This is bigger than Alexander's mistakes. Without him, without this alliance, you'll be alone, Scarlett." Her voice softened, taking a motherly tone. "The Winters pack clearly favors Grace. They're isolating you. You'll have no power to stand against them." I straightened, my emerald eyes locking onto hers. My voice was steady when I spoke. "I don't need Alexander's protection or yours. The only thing I've needed is respect, and your son certainly hasn't given me that." Victoria's composure slipped further. "You don't understand. You think this is about pride? Scarlett, you and Alexander together, the symbolism alone." "Pride?" I cut her off, my voice sharp. "This isn't pride, Victoria. This is about loyalty, respect, things your son doesn't even know the meaning of. Maybe I was naive to think he could grow into the role of a mate, but I won't make the mistake of waiting for him to prove me right." Victoria's jaw tightened. Her hands, usually so steady, trembled slightly as she clasped them in front of her. "You keep holding Grace against him. The situation was complicated." "Complicated?" I laughed bitterly. "Oh no, it's simple. Your son has spent months running to Grace, publicly, over and over again. Every time he stood by her, he betrayed me, and you expect me to ignore all of that? To pretend he's still worthy of being my mate?" "You don't understand the pressure Alexander is under," Victoria shot back, her tone rising. Her composure was gone now. "Do you think this is easy for him? The council, the pack. Do not ask me to pity him," I snapped, my emerald eyes blazing. "I have stood in the face of your pack's whispers. I endured their mocking stares while your son cowered behind Grace. So no, I will not pity Alexander Amber." Victoria took a step closer, her tone softening again. She was trying another tactic now. "I can see that you're angry, and you have every right to be. Scarlett, you're not wrong about Alexander. He's made mistakes. I won't make excuses for them. But this isn't just about him. It's about what you'll lose if you give up this bond." "And what am I supposed to gain by keeping it?" I said coldly. "Influence, power, protection," she replied smoothly. Her voice lowered, almost pleading. "You may think you're strong enough to fight alone, Scarlett, but you're not. The Winters pack is making it clear. Grace is their priority. Without Alexander's alliance, without my support, you will be an outsider. Alone." Something flickered in my chest, but it wasn't doubt. It was rage. I stepped closer, my voice calm but dripping with venom. You think I'm afraid of standing alone? That I can't survive without Alexander? My lips curled into a humorless smile. Let me make this clear, Victoria. I would rather stand completely alone than stay tethered to a man who has proved time and again that I do not matter to him. For a moment, she said nothing. A tense silence settled between us. Then she took a deep breath and folded her hands in front of her. Her steadiness returned, but I could see the cracks beneath her calm. If this is about Grace, she tried again carefully, I can handle her. I tilted my head, narrowing my eyes. Yes, Victoria said quickly, sensing an opportunity. I can send her away, even to Europe. She'll still receive treatment, but she won't be a problem here anymore. You won't have to see her. Stop. My words cut through hers like a blade. You're asking me to trust that you'll make her disappear? When Alexander will always hold that bond with her, no matter where she goes? No, I shook my head firmly. I won't be second to her. Not now. Not ever. Victoria's mask of composure broke completely this time. Her shoulders tensed, and she looked away briefly, as if trying to regain control of her emotions. When she turned back to me, her voice was sharp again. You're making a mistake, Scarlett. Your pride is clouding your judgment. I said nothing. Instead, I reached for the ceremonial choker around my neck, the one she'd gleefully fastened earlier. The silver felt cool in my hands as I unlatched it. Victoria's eyes widened. What are you doing? Without a word, I placed the choker in her hands. Its moonstone centerpiece gleamed in the sunlight, a glaring reminder of everything she demanded from me. This, I said, gesturing to the choker, is a symbol of loyalty, of faith. But it means nothing to me now. Take it back. Scarlett, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. My voice was steady, unyielding. I understand that your son has no loyalty to me, that I was only ever a pawn in this game. Well, find yourself another pawn, Victoria, because I am done. I turned on my heel and walked away. Behind me, I heard her sharp intake of breath and the faint clink of the choker as she gripped it tightly. But I didn't stop. As I descended the mansion steps, I heard her voice rise behind me, sharp and commanding. Investigate Grace's condition fully. She barked to her beta. I want every detail. No more excuses. I smirked. It seemed even Victoria was starting to question the truth behind Grace's so-called illness. The courtyard was expansive, its perfect stone pathways and manicured gardens stretching toward the shadowed borders ahead. I reached the middle of it when I felt the heavy weight of another presence. Scarlett. His voice echoed across the courtyard before I saw him. Alexander stepped from the shadows, his amber eyes glowing faintly. His imposing frame blocked my path, everything about him radiating dominance, except to me. His wolf mason's energy pushed against the space between us, but Cora stood strong within me, refusing to back down. You're still here? I drawled an eyebrow. You can't just walk away from this, he said, his voice tight with frustration. I tilted my head. Watch me. For a moment, he didn't say anything. His gaze searched mine as though he thought he could intimidate me into breaking. But I didn't flinch. Finally, he straightened his posture, his tone shifting into something colder. Jason will escort you back to your home, he ordered. I snorted, shaking my head. Escort me? Are you serious right now? You will not wander territories alone, he said firmly, his alpha authority creeping into his voice. I laughed bitterly, the sound cutting through the tension. You think you can command me? That's rich. You're my intended mate, he snapped, his amber eyes glowing brighter with frustration. You're my responsibility. I cut him off, my voice rising with anger. Responsibility? When has protecting me ever been your priority? When you left me alone to face your pack's whispering wolves? Or perhaps when you abandoned me to stand at Grace's bedside instead? His entire frame stiffened. For a moment, his gaze softened like he might argue, but I didn't let him. I don't need your beta. I don't need you or your ridiculous notions of duty. My voice was firm, final. I said, Jason will take you home. His tone deepened, suggesting this was an order, not a request. And I said no, I growled back, my emerald eyes gleaming as Cora's power rose to meet Mason's challenge. Chapter 20, Fractured Defiance, Scarlett's POV. I turned toward the grand gates, the sprawling amber-packed mansion fading behind me as the cool evening air brushed across my skin. The weight of the day, Victoria's endless manipulations, Alexander's piercing stares, and the unbearable presence of that ceremonial choker clung to me like armor I couldn't wait to tear off. For once, freedom lay ahead, an open path, no commands, no expectations, just silence. But then I saw him, Alexander. He materialized from the courtyard like he'd been waiting for this exact moment, his amber eyes sharp as daggers as they locked on me. His presence was commanding and suffocating, just like always. I barely took 2 steps before his voice cracked the air sharply. Scarlett. Stop. Stop. I didn't stop. I wasn't a wolf who obeyed empty commands. He couldn't touch me with his alpha authority. Not now, not ever. He stepped in my path, cutting me off completely. Broad shoulders squared, chin high, his amber eyes burned with anger, frustration, and something deeper I refused to recognize. Jason appeared like a ghost, stepping just behind him. The beta's stiff posture tried to mask the unease flickering in his eyes, like he knew this wasn't going to end well. I glanced between the two, letting silence stretch just long enough for it to sting. At last, I arched one brow and tilted my head mockingly. Well? I asked dryly. Come to beg me for something? Or are you both just determined to waste my time? Alexander's jaw clenched. His hands flexed at his sides and his energy pulsed thickly in the space between us. Enough, Scarlett, he said finally, his deep voice rumbling with restrained fury. You're under my protection until the marking ceremony. His words struck a nerve, but I didn't flinch. Cora stirred beneath my skin, her growl vibrating through my bones like thunder. She wasn't going to tolerate this. I wasn't going to tolerate this. 2 steps brought me closer, close enough to feel the heat rolling off him like a furnace. My emerald eyes bored into his, daring him to try harder. Protection? I repeated, my voice dripping with venom. My lips curled into a smile, cold, sharp, and anything but friendly. You think I need your protection? Where was that protection while your pack tore me apart with their whispers, while Grace cried into your shoulder, begging for your loyalty? His nostrils flared, a flicker of guilt crossing his expression. It was brief, but I caught it, and I hated it. I hated that it wasn't enough. You're bound to me until the ceremony, he said again, his tone firmer, heavier now, like repetition might make his claim more believable. My laughter broke free like ice crackling under pressure, sharp, cutting, and without an ounce of warmth. Bound, I mocked. No, Alexander, you're bound, tied up in your own lies and split loyalties. But me? I leaned closer, my voice lowering to a whisper, but no less deadly. I don't belong to you. Not now, not ever. Before I could step around him, his hand shot out like lightning and gripped my arm. His hold was firm, almost bruising, as Wolf Mason surged through his veins, pushing dominance into the touch, as if some primal instinct thought it could keep me in place. Cora rose in me instantly, heat coiling tight in my chest like a roaring furnace. My claws sharpened at my sides as I turned my gaze down to his hand. Slowly, deliberately, I pressed my nails to his skin. He didn't release me. Not yet. Take your hand off me, I said through gritted teeth, my voice low and calm, dangerously calm. My emerald gaze met his, flashing bright as Cora's presence surged stronger. Alexander glared back for a moment longer, his jaw tight before releasing me. But he didn't step back. This is for your safety, he growled, his frustration clear in every word. Safety? I sneered. Cora's power hummed through my veins as I pushed forward. From what? You think I'm afraid of rogues? Of danger? You don't even know me. Jason, standing to the side, shifted nervously. His beta position might have demanded composure, but no amount of training could hide his unease. Before Alexander could retort, his expression shifted. Briefly, his sharp amber gaze softened. His head tilted slightly, as though listening to something, or someone, through his thoughts. I recognized the flicker of a wolf bond immediately, and I didn't have to guess who was on the other end of it. Grace. I said her name aloud like it was poison on my tongue. Alexander's face hardened, but he didn't respond, his focus clearly pulled elsewhere. I could almost hear her voice in my own head, pleading, crooning, begging for him to come running, like she always did. Some distant part of me waited for him to ignore her, but much deeper, I already knew he wouldn't. His features melted subtly, not enough for Jason to notice, but I noticed. His hand, clenched at his side moments ago, opened slightly. His shoulders dropped by just a fraction. This man was supposed to be an alpha, a king in waiting. And yet here he was, crumbling at the sound of some Omega's voice in his head. Without severing the internal mind link, he murmured softly, his voice barely loud enough for me to hear. I know it hurts, Grace. Try to rest. I'll be there soon. There it was. Every ounce of his true loyalty bared for the world, or at least for me, to see. When he finally severed the link and turned back to me, his expression was tighter than before. That golden amber glint in his eyes didn't sparkle. It dulled, weighed down by whatever guilt or worry he carried for her. You're unbelievable. The words left my mouth before I could stop them. Alexander stiffened, his muscles coiled tight like he wanted to react but couldn't decide how. No, I interrupted. Don't even try. You think any of this works? That anything you have to say carries even a glimmer of meaning while you crawl back to her every time she calls? She's hurting, Alexander said instantly, his voice rising fractionally. Do you think I'm just going to ignore her suffering? She's your true mate, I said bluntly. The words stung as they passed my lips, but I didn't let it show. Own it, Alexander. Stop hiding behind excuses. We both see right through your act. Tension rippled between us, thick and nearly suffocating. And then, just like that, something in him snapped. I'm offering you aid, Scarlett. His words lashed out like a whip. His hands gestured roughly as though trying to make me see something I refused to acknowledge. You know what I have access to, he pushed. Supplies that could triple what your healing center has. Connections that could elevate the whole. Stop, I said coldly. My tone was sharp, slicing right through whatever plea he was about to make. His frustrations mounted, flickering in his gaze as he stared down at me. You think I care about your bribes? I asked, taking another step closer. Save that act for someone who needs rescuing, like Grace. She seems to like being saved. His eyes flickered again, guilt flashing just briefly before his wolf surged stronger. His next words carried the growl of Mason's frustration. The marking ceremony, Alexander began firmly, will proceed as planned. Think carefully, Scarlett. You don't know the consequences of rejecting this alliance. I tilted my head, a twisted little smile tugging at my lips. You're worried about me? The smile vanished as quickly as it had come. My emerald eyes blazed dangerously as I took yet another step forward. Hurry back to Grace, I whispered darkly, enjoying the way he froze at the words. With silver poisoning spreading so rapidly, who knows how long she has left? The intent behind my words was clear. He knew exactly what I was implying. The tension between us peaked. His wolf growled ferociously beneath his skin. Mason surged forward, his amber gaze brighter than before, burning with barely controlled dominance. But I wasn't waiting for him to act. I turned on my heel sharply, deliberately, and began walking past him. My head didn't turn once, ignoring Jason's cautious shuffle as he tried to decide whether to stop me. Alexander's roar followed me across the court, sulking, furious sound filled with fire and power. It rang out behind me, echoing across the stone pathways and into the night. Cora huffed in satisfaction, her energy mingling with mine as the amber pack's boundaries came into focus ahead.